Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock-flavoured podcast. On this show, the Halloween period rampages onwards towards Sabbat. But first, Laws gamely accepted the challenge when I sent him a book that failed to win the patron vote, but I had a spare copy of anyway. SLIMER by Harry Adam Knight, that pseudonym of John Brosnan and Leroy Kettle, authors of one of last year's excursions here on Breakfast in the Ruins, The Fungus. Fair warning, the sexual violence foghorn is sounding for this episode. We don't dwell on it, but we do refer to it. And this one rattles on for a while. So, without further ado, I ask that you retire to your cabin, get in your bunk with a can of special brew, and join us as we head into the rough North Sea and try to survive SLIMER.
Yes, fucking hell is the apt word to start this because of the book we're going to read. Well, the book we read, to be fair. Loz is back in Derry and Tom's, and we thought we'd better just kick off quickly because he's only just arrived and we need to go through the Wandering Beer table, the D6 Wandering Beer table. So we'll start at your end. What's your first beer on your side?
Oh, it's everybody's favourite, the Carlsberg Danish Special Brew Lager.
Oh, good Lord. Good
Possibly
Lord.
the worst drink ever created by man.
Sweet Jesus and all the baby angels.
Exactly the very same.
Whereas I've got Gold Label Special Beer Barley Wine.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think that's of equal calibre. They both look the same, don't they?
The number one barley wine.
Yeah. There's only two.
Yeah.
The other one's
We should probably explain that because this is set on a North Sea oil rig, this book that we're going to talk about, I thought we would try and get it at least themed appropriately so it feels like we're on a 1970s oil rig.
Yeah.
Or at the very least at home from a trip to a North Sea oil rig, because you might not get away with drinking Gold Label on the oil rig. Okay, what's next?
We would.
Yeah.
This one, it's confusing.
It's in a weird place.
Fresh from the north. It's a Northern Monk job.
Yep. Yeah, I'll read
I can't read it.
Yeah.
It is being blind and all that.
Great Northern Grub, Northern Monk, Dumped Chocolate Digestive Decadent Stout, 8.4%.
Of course it is.
Right. So my next one, this is a hangover from one that I've had kicking around for a while. And if any of the patrons listen to the Patron Extra on Alien Romulus, they'll know this. It's the Alien Romulus Red Berry Sour Beer at, is that 5.2%? I'll just get my glasses out. I should know this because I've drunk some already. That says only in cinemas. That's not the alcohol content.
No.
Where are we? 6%. It's 6%, this one. And it's called Something in the Water.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, there's something in the water.
Right. What is it?
Next.
It's probably an alien. This is another Northern Monk. We are not sponsored by Northern Monk. A 10-year anniversary special of the Mango Lassie Heathen IPA. That's probably sounds the most pleasant so far.
Yeah.
Apart from the chocolate
alcohol
biscuit.
is that one?
That is... It's 4%, I think, but I might have just misread it. No, of course it isn't. 7.2%.
Oh, balls. And the final one that we have is one you brought fucking ages ago, probably last year sometime, called I Know Karate Voodoo 2. Now, we probably should have held this back because Graham made the point earlier on. This would have been the ideal beer for if we'd remembered that this was here to talk about Sabbat. Sabbat is the next episode coming down the track, which is about the ex-SAS priest.
I'm liking it already.
Yeah, well, read it. You might change your mind. But no spoilers. Suffice to say, the book that we're going to talk about today is ever so slightly rapey.
I have a couple of issues with it, if I'm honest. I don't want to disparage anybody from writing books, however. There's probably a few things that are massively problematic for me.
We'll get to it. Yeah. Well, it's not as problematic as Sabbat.
Is it not?
No.
Holy crap.
Yeah, for reasons that will become apparent when we get round to the Sabbat episode. But yes, I Know Karate, Voodoo 2, and this is 3.2%.
No, I do apologise.
So if we get through 4 of these, we might be begging for this one to get rolled up. Yeah. So before we kick off, roll the D6, Mr. Bearfield.
2.
We didn't actually line them up in order, did we? Right.
Well, if we go from right to left.
Who's right?
1, 2,
All right, okay,
3,
fair enough.
4, 5, 6.
It probably makes sense to start with the pudding.
Oh yeah,
doesn't it?
Fair enough.
Yeah, so this, we've rolled, what was it?
A 2.
Great Northern Grub, Northern Monk, Dunk's Chocolate Digestive Decadent Stout, 8.4% chocolate biscuit.
Yeah.
Let's give that a go then. It's all right.
That's all right.
It's all right. It's a nice stout, that.
It's got that.
Oh, yeah.
It's got 8% kick in the back of the throat.
Yeah, it's got the brake fluid and raisins macerated under a T62 tank engine in 1964 kind of back taste.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Apart from all those words.
So what are we here to do, Loz? What are we here to talk about? We're here to talk about Slimer, published in 1983.
I'll just get my copy.
You see,
I've lost it.
we're getting this out. We're getting this out of the way fast, so we can drink all this beer and go for a curry.
Yeah.
I kind of forced this upon you.
You did.
It's Halloween. I thought, we're going to do a Halloween book. Loz is coming over. We should do a Halloween book.
We should. We've
This,
not
of
done
course,
it before,
didn't win the poll. I think it came third.
There was a poll.
Yeah, there was a patron poll. Sabat won the vote. So the poll was Sabat, the Graveyard Vultures. Sabat
who's
number
that
1.
by?
Guy and Smith.
Oh, right, okay.
Then there was Slimer by Harry Adam Knight. This is our second Harry Adam Knight book on
Is
the
it?
podcast.
He's written more than one.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's actually a pseudonym for an Australian author called John Brosnan and a British author called Leroy Kettle. And they wrote one called The Fungus, which Graham and I covered last year,
Oh, right, okay.
which is quite entertaining.
Yeah.
About London overtaken by a terrible fungus
Mushroom.
growth. Yeah. It was pretty good, like post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Had a battle bus in it, like, which was all the rage in the 70s.
It's a bit like
80s.
Last of Us, then, with its
Yeah.
fungal...
One of the key things that we talked about was just how much The Last of Us seems to have taken from the fungus. But yeah, it was interesting. So that one's out there if people want to listen. We had Slugs by Sean Hudson.
Oh, right. Classic. I have read that, because
Been on
I
the
think
poll a
you
few
forced
times.
me to do it.
A long time ago.
Yeah,
probably.
a long time ago.
Yeah. That didn't win either. And what was the other one? Was it Slither? I've forgotten already. I've forgotten what the other one was, but they all began with S.
Yeah.
That was the theme. And Sabat won out. But we thought, we didn't think.
No.
I thought, I've read Slimer already. Slimer?
Slimer.
I've read Slimer already. I've got things I want to say about it. I've got thoughts about it. Loz is coming over, therefore I will send him a copy. I'm not sure how you feel about that.
Well, sadly, I did have to read it.
Yeah.
So there was that. but I am a good friend, so that's all I'm going to say on the subject.
Yeah, I think this will end up being about our 95th episode, and I think over the last 5 or 6 years, you've got off quite lightly on some of the book choices by actually reading books that you like.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, whereas other poor, unfortunate souls have been landed with things like Tansman of Gore by fate or other degree.
I think I'd counterbalance that, though, by saying I have drunk some of the worst beers ever created by man.
Oh, well, yeah,
and some of the best ones. Well, not...
Well,
no, hang on a minute.
That's a bit of a stretch.
No, I think I might have hallucinated that last bit. Should I? Yeah, so that's counterbalance. So good literature, terrible beer.
Yeah.
Now we're combining terrible beer with terrible literature.
Now, by and large, I'm not sure how much of a horror novel reader you are. Where do you stand on horror novels?
I'm not a massive fan, to be honest. It depends what you class as horror, really, doesn't it? So I suppose when I was younger, I probably read a few Stephen King books, which were all right.
Yeah,
obviously they're really well written and stuff, but they don't. And I've read a couple of James Herbert ones. I think probably you lent me them. There's The Fog and the what's the one with the spear?
The spear,
which is a good spear. Yeah, that was all right. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah,
but it's not something I kind of hunt out. If it's a good book, it's got horrific stuff in it. I can deal with that. Which a lot of fantasy stuff does in a way. It's got gothic elements to it.
Yeah.
I like kind of some of the ghost story stuff. I don't mind that, like the M.R. James stuff. Dracula, obviously.
Yeah.
That kind of oeuvre.
Yeah, everybody likes a bit of Dracula.
I don't mind the gothic stuff. I'm not an all-out... See, with films as well, I'm not an all-out horror film kind of... most of it I find boring.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen some of these eyes scooped out with a spoon once.
Yeah.
Don't need to see it twice.
Yeah.
unless they do it twice
Yeah.
in the same scene. But yeah, so I'm not. It's not really my thing, but I can appreciate a well-written horror thing that can give you shivers.
Mm-hmm.
And certain ones I've read have kind of went, ooh, that's a bit spooky. But
Slimer, on the other hand.
Yeah, Slimer, on the other hand, when I was reading it, because obviously there's a few issues with it, what I didn't want to do is just slag off a book.
Yeah.
But it was very hard, to be honest. It's very hard not to. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, I don't want Harry Adam Knight pseudonym of Bob Kettle and Mr. Carol G's to go, hang on a minute, he's slagging off my book, he's never written Slimer.
Well, interesting thing is, so it's a pseudonym, John Brosnan, who was an Australian author, who died in 2005.
That's all right.
So, God bless you, John, R.I.P. Also wrote Bullman novelisations.
That's quite a leap, isn't it?
Yeah. But he did some other sci-fi as well. Leroy Kettle, on the other hand. Oh, John Brosnan also wrote some 2000 AD stories in the 90s. Yeah, so he got around a bit. Leroy Kettle, on the other hand, very, very interesting character in that he was an author. He was like part of like sort of an underground. I forget what they called it, like Rat-tastic. Anyway, like underground sort of comic scene in the 70s. Okay. Yeah. But he's probably best known for being one of the architects of the Disability Discrimination Act 1995 and got an OBE for his role in it.
That doesn't come through in the text.
It doesn't really, does it? No, it doesn't at all. Yeah, so, I think when it comes to 70s and 80s pulp horror, I think it's definitely more my scenario than yours, because I read fucking loads of it when I was at school. But this one, it's an interesting one. Without spoiling it, how would you quickly pitch this book to someone over a cup of tea at work?
I would pitch it as...
I mean, no, okay, number one, you wouldn't.
No. That's what I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's all over the place, isn't it? It's kind of like, in a way, it's more sci-fi than horror in its monstery ways.
Yeah.
But I would probably say some of the blandest, least crafted characters I've read in a long time.
Yeah.
With probably the blandest hero of all time. I mean, Paul, fucking hell.
Yeah.
How he got voted to be the leader of the group.
Well, let's talk about our 6 core characters then.
Yeah.
So, we're reading the most recent reprint of this by Valancourt Books, which I think was reprinted
it looks
5
quite
years
nice.
ago. It's quite a nice cover, I think.
Yeah, it's alright,
Yeah, but
it's very green.
It got one edition in the UK in the early 80s, and it got one edition in the USA in 1989, and was never reprinted.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something you just found in second-hand bookshops.
Yeah.
But it came out the same year as Slugs, and was released by the same imprint.
Oh, right, okay.
But whereas Slugs was getting advertised on buses, this got no advertisement whatsoever, and the launch party was just, I think, in John Brosnan's flat or something. You know?
Yeah, you can probably... I mean, Slugs, at least you can put a massive slug on the side of somewhere.
Yeah.
Slimer... I mean, not only is it a terrible title for a book, it's so bad, isn't it?
Well, according to the introduction to this, the introduction written by Leroy Kettle...
I didn't read that, if I'm brutally honest.
Slimer was just a holding title that they were too lazy to replace.
Brilliant. I think there's probably quite a lot of that throughout the book.
So it ended up getting printed under that title. Yeah. So our characters, well, we've got Paul, as you've mentioned, who's our de facto leader. Why is the de facto leader?
Yeah, so he's the main protagonist. What doesn't... None of the backstory of any character is explained.
No.
So, because it's set in the northeast, I immediately thought, they're probably from Hull.
Yeah.
Possibly Grimsby.
Yeah.
So you'll never explain where they're from, which we'll touch on the weaponry in a bit.
Yeah.
But that kind of like... And helicopter riding.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so Paul is this guy... You find out his surname, but by that time I'd zoned out.
Yeah.
Who's with Linda? He's
3 couples.
Yeah, 3 couples.
There's Paul and Linda.
There is Paul and Linda. Maybe based on McCartney and
Never even thought of
that. Yeah. The least. Maybe they're all based on a Beatle.
Yeah.
Maybe with Ringo not being in it.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. So Paul's there. Linda's probably equally as bland, but she's attractive.
Yeah.
Apparently. Then you've got
Mark and Chris.
Mark and Chris. So Mark is a heroin addict.
And it's his dad's yacht.
Yeah, it's his dad's yacht, yeah. And then you've got Chris, who's like, oh, she might be a bit psychic.
Yeah. Crystals.
Or a bit
beads.
annoying. Like,
Yeah.
we've met him in our lives,
Yeah.
you know. It's like hippies who are
Yeah.
into kind of like angels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just not for me.
There's Alex and Rochelle.
Oh, yeah. So Alex, obviously no spoilers, but the villain of the piece, one may say.
Yeah,
and
humans are the real monsters.
Oh, yeah. And Rochelle, who, if this was a film, she'd be the fit lady, the attractive one, who usually loses her clothes, as far as I could work.
Yeah, so Rochelle, the only thing we know about Rochelle is Alex is a monstrous creep who's American, and Rochelle is his girlfriend, so she's probably a little bit louche. When it comes to...
Well, there's a really bad line in it later on in the book about their relationship, which did make me kind of go, ooh, what are the authors trying to get to at this point? We'll probably come to that. You've probably got the same thing.
So of these 6 characters, the only 2 with any indication that there's any additional dimensionality to them is Chris, because she's into beads and crystals.
Yeah.
And thinks she might be a little bit psychic.
Yeah.
That never comes into play again.
That's what I like about it. Yeah. I've got a bad feeling about that. Yeah. No shit. Yeah. There's that kiss of all the bodies.
Yeah. I mean, she's got a bad feeling about Alex, but to be fair, you don't need to be psychic
to figure
that one out.
And there was that bit with... Yeah.
We'll probably mention that.
Yeah.
We'll touch on that.
I think
and there's, of course, Alex, who's the massive, colossal creep. And they've all been trying to do a drug deal, and they've come from Morocco on Mark's dad's boat with 3/4 of a ton of marijuana.
Yeah.
And because Mark's a fucking idiot and a heroin addict, he went below into the engine room with a lit joint and blew the boat up.
Yeah, what a goon.
So it kicks off. He's a complete Burke. They're now on a dinghy in the North Sea.
Yeah.
In the fog, completely stuck, and they've got nowhere to go. They're bickering. It's cold because the North Sea's cold. And then they think, well, they're in luck because they happen across an oil rig with a logo on the side that says Brinkstone Oil Company.
Yeah, but before that, they talk about going for a piss a lot, don't they?
Of course they do.
Yeah, the ladies want a wee.
Yeah.
And Alex lasciviously wants to watch them.
Yeah, Alex is going,
way over the
don't
top.
mind me.
Yeah. So if you ever want to meet an utter knobhead, he is the man.
He is, for me, the biggest problem with the book.
Yes.
If he weren't in it, it would be... I don't think enjoyable is the right word, but it wouldn't be as gross and unpleasant.
Yeah.
But let's have a look. So they've seen these oil rig legs. We can't just sit here, said Linda. We've got to get up there. But how? Asked Rochelle. You see any escalators? She was right. Neither the 4 supporting legs nor the network of girder struts between them offered any visible means of climbing up the platform. There has to be a way to get up there, said Paul. They can't just use helicopters all the time to get on and off. What if they want to transfer people or equipment from boats? Unexpectedly, he got his answer. There was the sound of an engine suddenly starting up somewhere on the rig, and then one of the cranes began to move. In startled silence, they watched as the arm of the crane swung out over the top of the platform holding a large metal cage. Then they all started to cheer as they realised what was happening. Woohoo! That's quite handy, isn't it? The cage was swiftly lowered until it was suspended just above the water a mere 10 yards or so from their boat. As quickly as possible, they paddled over to it. The cage was about 8 feet wide and only had 3 sides. The 4th side was open, apart from a chain stretched across it. Getting from the boat into the cage was a tricky manoeuvre, and all of them were soaked to the waist by the time they were inside and clinging to the wide steel mesh of the sides. There was a jerk, and the cage began to rise rapidly. Mark watched the lifeboat get smaller and smaller as it drifted away. It looked a disturbingly fragile little vessel seen from above in this way, and he wondered how much longer they could have survived in it, particularly as the sea was beginning to turn ominous. The cage continued to rise, and Mark felt a wave of dizziness overcome him. He didn't like heights at the best of times. Swallowing hard, he shut his eyes and clung tightly to the mesh, hoping the others weren't noticing his distress. So first indication that Mark's maybe a little bit fragile.
Yeah.
Now I know what a fish feels like when it's hauled out of the sea in a net, he heard Linda gasp. Then came a jarring bump as he opened his eyes. The cage was now sitting safely on the top deck of the platform. Nearby were 3 huge chimneys, and looming overhead was the boom of the crane that had rescued them, but there was no sign of any welcoming committee. The place was deserted. They got shakily out of the cage and stood looking around. After all that time at sea, it felt strange to be on something solid again. Where is everybody? Asked Chris. Paul was staring up at the driver's cabin on the crane. Sounding puzzled, he said, I can't even see anyone inside that thing. There's got to be, cried Alex. You think it picked us up all by itself? Then where is he? I'll go see, said Mark suddenly, and hurried over to the ladder leading up to the cabin. It wasn't too high, and he was anxious to make up for his display of weakness in the cage. While the others watched, he began to climb. Halfway up, he knew he'd made a mistake. The familiar dizziness swept over him, and he was forced to stop and shut his eyes for a few minutes. But then he forced himself to continue on, and, to his relief, he finally made it to the open cabin doorway. He was so thankful to have got up there, the fact that the cabin was empty didn't sink in at first. Then, when it did, he stared around the cramped interior with a growing sense of confusion. It was crazy. There was no way the driver could have got down that ladder without them seeing him. So where was he? Then Mark saw the overalls. They were lying in a corner at the rear of the cabin. Mark frowned as he bent over them for a closer look. There was something strange in the way they were lying there, as if someone had spent time arranging the arms and legs instead of just dropping the garment on the floor. He picked up one of the sleeves and recoiled with disgust as a black, oily tendril of slime slowly dropped from the cuff onto the metal floor. A horrible smell filled the cabin and Mark started to choke. He knew he had to get out of there. And fast. Well, there we go. We've got our setup.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of an oil rig horror story.
I did a game on a oil rig.
Yeah. What was that all about?
You played it.
Did I?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I was
Massive
probably
projects. That was one
probably
with
mashed.
Gavin Hamilton.
Oh.
Oi.
R.I.P. Magic Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I picked out from the first couple of chapters were he likes an adverb, doesn't he? Or they.
Mm.
Everybody just says things
Yeah.
resentfully or quizzically.
Yeah.
Or it's like, I mean, I'm not a great writer by a long stretch, but there was that. But then there was even in chapter 2, so I think we do need to come to the sexism angle at some point.
Well, let's do it now.
So chapter 2, bearing in mind they've just arrived on this oil rig in the middle of nowhere, we have this. Come on, said Rochelle. Let's go out before my tits fall off from the cold. Right? So that's one line.
Yeah.
The wind was whipping her pink-streaked hair and her lips were almost the same colour as the small blue jewel at the side of her nose. Paul couldn't help glancing down at her nipples, which were clearly visible, hard and swollen behind the thin fabric of her shirt.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I mean, realistically, at that point, she'd go, it's freezing. My nipples are like bullets.
Yeah, if they're from Hull.
Yeah. Yeah.
My tattooed knees are freezing. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are from Hull, so we're allowed to say it.
Yeah.
He grinned and nodded. I tell you what, Paul, he's either got the worst sense of humour ever, or he just grins for the sake of it, doesn't he? It's like, somebody just had their head pulled off. He grins sarcastically. You a simpleton.
If only Paul would grin sarcastically more often, he might have a little bit more depth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we get a bit of a backstory on how much Paul doesn't like Alex, just in case.
Well, he's a knobhead. Fair enough.
He is a super knobhead.
Yeah.
Just the Alex character is just rubbish, isn't he? So it's a bit Scooby-Doo, isn't it?
Yeah.
And at one point when they're going through the corridors of the empty, doesn't seem to be an oil rig, does it?
No. We found out very quickly it's some kind of super secret lab.
Yeah. And we have such language as, it's creepy, said Chris. She kept glancing nervously around as if she expected something to jump out at them, even though there was no one in the lab for anybody to hide. Paul gave up his examination of the clothes. This is getting us nowhere. Let's move on. Paul reminds me of, I never read The Famous Five, but who's the...
Julian.
Yeah. He's Julian, isn't he? Come on, lads!
Yeah, the only frame of reference I've really got for Julian, because I never really read The Famous... I remember watching the TV series, but it's Peter Richardson in Five Go Mad in Dorset.
Yeah. Exactly.
Come on, this is rubbish. Let's just move on. Lashings of ginger beer, etc. Yeah, so of course, they made their way through the rig. They found a UV sterilising room, so they're obviously smart enough to twig that it's a sterilising thing, and a medical lab, and more clothes, a lab coat with, again, underwear inside. Weird.
It is weird, isn't it? But just underwear.
Yeah.
Not like a shirt, socks, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, just pants.
Yeah. Yeah, because all the women on this oil rig wear a lab coat with underwear.
Yeah, that's it.
That's all they wear.
That's all they wear.
Yeah.
It's a weird rule, but they signed up for that contract.
Yeah. So we get it reinforced that Chris and Mark are hippies. Mark into healthy. and also that he shoots down anybody who brings up the Mary Celeste because he knows it all. He's a know-it-all bore. Alex, funnily enough, is the one that makes a little sense of it all, though. Okay, said Paul quickly. Can we save the arguments for later? Right now we've got more important things to worry about because, of course, Paul needs to drive the plot forward. Yes, said Linda. Like, where's the nearest bathroom? I'm bursting. So am I, said Rochelle. And I'm starving. Then let's get
bloody
moving.
women want to go for a piss all the
You're
time.
right, it is like the famous five.
It is.
Then let's get moving. We'll finish checking out this floor and then go down to the next one. There has to be somebody here. And what if we don't find anybody? Asked Chris. Then we'll just make ourselves at home until someone turns up, said Paul.
But,
oh my God, you're right. This is fucking Enid Blyton level characterisation.
The reason I know it is because I was sat with Matilda. That's my daughter, by the way. She's 15, and was having a chat. I said, "I've got to read this really terrible book Emily sent me," and she was going, "What's it about?" I was like, "I don't know." I started reading it, so I started reading the first 3 chapters aloud to really annoy her. Yeah. And she's going, "Dad, stop it! It's terrible." But when I was reading it like you were. Oh, come on! This is absolutely ludicrous.
Oh, come on, gang. Yeah. Paul, what do you think this is? Mark was standing next to the sculpture made of different coloured ping pong balls. It was at least 8 feet high. It's obvious, jerk, said Alex before Paul could reply. It's a model of a molecule. The balls are supposed to be atoms. We had one in our science room at high school. Paul shook his head. No, I don't think it is. Then what is it, wise guy? I think it's a model of a chromosome. See how the rows of ping pong balls spiral around each other? That's the famous double helix. I think each represents a separate gene. There was silence in the room while they all stared at the model. Then Chris said in a bleak voice, Genetic engineering. What? Asked Mark. Genetic engineering. That's what they've been doing here. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
I don't like it one bit.
Linda frowned. I don't get it. What would a genetic engineering lab be doing on an oil rig? Exactly, said Chris. What are they trying to hide?
Oh my God, I don't know.
Holy crap.
Well, I've got this bit, right? So basically, blah, blah, blah. It brings me back
blah,
to...
blah, blah, atom bomb. Yeah. Blah, 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 secret plot.
Yeah, exactly. Blah, 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 monsters, etc. But so it comes back again to, what's the backstory of these guys? Yeah. It's like, Paul just seems to be, oh, you foolish man, that's not a molecule, it's a double helix. Yeah. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. It's the famous double helix.
Yeah, but the bit that kind of made me go, oh, fuck right off, was this bit, right? I'm putting my glasses on so I can read it. Alex immediately rushed over and snatched it out of her hands. Wow, it's an M16, he cried excitedly. He began to examine its mechanism with practised hands, treating it like an old friend. I don't know what type of old friend, you know, but then it probably was, Paul realised. He remembered that Alex had spent some time in the US Army before being dishonourably discharged for dealing in drugs.
Yes.
Bit of backstory.
Dishonourably discharged for being a massive twat.
Yeah. But then it gets better. Is it in working order? Paul asked, trying to hide his alarm. What's he hiding his alarm about? I don't know. But how does Paul know? He could have worked in a chip shop for all we know. Yeah. Sure is. Paul pulled out the magazine and loaded too. It looks pretty light, said Paul, keeping his tone relaxed. What?
Yeah.
Then we have this. I don't know much about guns, but for fuck's sake. The stock and grip are made of hollow fiberglass. It don't weigh much more than a 22, said Alex, pleased to show off his knowledge, but it packs a hell of a bigger punch than a 22. It takes 5.63 ammo, and you can fire it like an ordinary rifle, 1 round at a time, or you can put the selector on auto like this. He demonstrated the selector on the side of the weapon, and fire off 18 rounds in a blink of an eye. And that's not wise, because the magazine only holds 18 rounds. Best just to touch the trigger when it's on auto. What the fuck?
Yeah. And the best thing about that, the most wonderful thing about that, like, crazy paragraph of description of the functioning of an M16 is that it's all wrong.
Brilliant.
I mean, I think the fiberglass bit is correct.
Well, yeah.
Well, the plastic, whatever the fuck it is. But there's no such thing as 5.63 ammo. And
why put that in? It can't be that hard to research.
Yeah, it's weird.
Pre-internet, isn't it? But
and any of our listeners who were RPG nerds who played Twilight 2000 and all those things like we did back in the day will burst out laughing at this experienced army dude saying, "Oh yeah, it takes 5.63 ammunition and there's 18 rounds in the magazine." So there's two ways of taking this. One is Harry Adam Knight didn't have a fucking clue what it was on about, or two, Alex is a bullshitter.
Oh, there is that.
So let's give Harry Adam Knight the benefit of the doubt and say,
this may turn the whole book on its head.
"Oh my god, yeah."
But then Paul, because he's in charge, goes, "Give me the gun."
Yeah.
He's like, "No."
Yeah.
And then somebody else finds another one.
Yeah.
And then Paul seems to be quite au fait with an M16 throughout the rest of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Despite working in a chip shop when he
Yeah.
was back in Barnsley.
So Alex is really keen on having this gun. He's obviously a massive twat, but he hasn't even got going yet.
No.
I mean, as it happens, they end up finding fucking loads of guns.
Oh, no,
There's guns all over the place.
Yeah, there's guns.
There's clobber in the living quarters. There's bloody clobber.
There's beans.
There's beans, many beans.
Many beans.
But it is an oil rig.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of getting us tins of beans to thematically link our evening tucker. I did get a tin of haggis.
I think we should probably eat that at some point.
Yeah. Later on, when we're drunk, we'll just microwave the haggis and shovel it in our gobs with a spoon.
Have you got brown sauce?
Yeah,
Excellent.
I have. Yeah. It's actually really nice.
Isn't it?
It's tinned haggis, yeah.
I quite like haggis.
It does leave something of a film on the inside of your
Sound
mouth,
of a truly great
but
haggis.
I actually quite like it, yeah. So there's clobber everywhere. Whatever was going on is dodgy as fuck. Some of the clobber has got, like, slashes in it. And as we go along, there's lots and lots of stuff in this taken from the thing.
There is.
And this was released the year after the
Yeah, I
thing.
remember you asked me to pitch it, so I was trying to think. At first they had, like, Alien on an oil rig, but that would be good.
Weirdly, there's a film from 1981 called The Intruder Within. I think it was a Canadian TV movie that is basically Alien on an oil rig. It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's alright in a way, but it's really fucking cheap. Well, worth a look if you like the horror on an oil rig angle. Yeah.
So I picked out a few of the bits, but mostly because I thought they were funny.
Yeah.
So it's not going to enhance anybody's experience. But my other favourite line of this chapter was from Chris. "Bastards," said Chris, who was, of course, a strong anti-vivisectionist. Absolutely brilliant.
We're unveiling a character, like unpeeling it like layers of an onion.
Sure not tell.
Well, and on the subject of unpeeling a character like layers of an onion, Alex wants Nookie, but Rochelle knees him in the nuts and says no.
Yeah, because she's tired.
Yeah.
Being fair to her, they've just been on a shipwreck.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one-dimensional, isn't there? And then there's kind of having an entire book of one-dimensional characters.
Yeah. Well, Chris knocks on the door next, so Alex is a bit cheesed off. Chris knocks on the door because Mark needs some smack.
Yeah. So
turns out Alex is a heroin dealer.
Yeah, I would have thought it. And also, they were bringing heroin back.
Yeah, he had hundreds grand worth of Moroccan smack.
Yeah.
In a
how
belt
much weed did they have?
3/4 of a ton.
Yeah, so I remember at one point later on in the story, Paul finds out about the heroin and he's a bit cross. He's going, "We could get 15 years for that."
Yeah.
It's like, what about the
I think
a ton of weed?
100 grand versus heroin, 3/4 of a ton of marijuana.
Yeah, exactly. I think.
Yeah.
I don't think you've thought it through, man.
Yeah. So Chris is begging Alex for smack, and unfortunately for Chris, the cost of business is rough sex in the form of 2 particularly rough blowjobs.
Oh, mate, yeah.
Yeah, and that's when everything starts to get a little bit unpleasant from the Alex perspective.
Yeah.
And it's quite unpleasant. And there's worse to come.
Yeah. Oh,
worse to come.
Yeah, that's just like a little taster, isn't it?
Yeah. But everybody gets horny at this point.
Yeah.
Because they find accommodation. And Paul and Linda get down to it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But they do get distracted. Paul and Linda moved together on their single bed. Their slow, sinuous love, the focus of their being. Their bodies slid slickly on each other, and their hands gently touched the flesh both knew so well. Paul was relaxed for the first time in days. He had no thoughts, only emotions. But then Linda suddenly stopped. "Listen, do you hear that?" she whispered urgently. Oh, no, not again. Earlier, they'd been distracted by the sound of others moving up and down the corridor, opening and shutting doors. He had no idea what they were up to, but he couldn't care less. It sounds like something big being dragged along the passageway, said Linda. Some kind of sack. Paul sighed and cocked his head to listen. She was right. It did sound as if a heavy sack was being dragged along outside. The noise stopped at their door, and then, after a brief pause, it was replaced by a curious scratching sound, as if a small animal was pawing at the door. What is that? Asked Linda in a frightened whisper. Probably Alex trying to be funny, said Paul. He rolled off and got up as quickly as possible. As he approached the door, he felt a prickle of unease travel up the bare skin along his spine. It occurred to him it might not be Alex after all, but one of the missing lab animals. Don't open the door, cried Linda in a low, urgent voice. Don't worry, I'm not going to, he assured her as he warily pressed his ear against the wood. At that precise moment there came a tremendous crash, and he recoiled in shock as the whole door shuddered under some enormous impact from the other side. Simultaneously, there was a bellowing roar that sounded totally unlike anything Paul had ever heard before. Then the door began to splinter inwards.
Good God!
Oh, my God! And what could it possibly be? Well, though partially stunned, Paul reacted with speed. He made a dive for the M16 lying on the floor behind the bunk, snatched it up, then spun round and aimed it at the door. There were now 5 long fissures in the top half of the door, and even as he looked, more began to appear. The terrible bellowing sound continued, almost drowning out Linda's high-pitched scream. He pulled the trigger. The weapon selector had obviously been left on auto, as the entire magazine emptied itself within seconds. The bullets passed through the door as if it wasn't there, and from the other side the angry bellowing became immediately a shriek of pain. The door stopped shuddering, and there was a sound of something very big and heavy rebounding off the opposite wall of the passageway. Then the shrieking began to fade as the animal, or whatever it was, began to move off down the corridor. They followed its progress to the end of the corridor, then heard it begin to go upstairs, leading to the level above. There were a few more distant crashes, then silence. Paul looked at Linda. She'd retreated to the far end of the bunk and was pressed back into a corner, her knees drawn up in front of her. Her face was completely white. He had never seen anyone so frightened before, and suspected his own face presented a similar picture. Paul, she said weakly. He swallowed and tried to give her a reassuring grin. He didn't succeed. It's okay.
Grin.
It's gone
Always
now.
works.
He put the now useless M16 down and began to struggle into his pants. Get dressed, he told her. We've got to check on the others and try and track down whatever that animal was and finish it off. Finish it off? She repeated blankly. Paul, what was it? I don't know. A bear, maybe.
As you do. Yeah,
yeah. One of those North Sea oil rig bears.
Yeah. We've heard so much about them. They swim around in the North Sea, get a bit bored, and then climb up the side.
Yeah.
They're well known for it.
Oh, it's amazing.
He tossed her clothes. Honestly, we skirted past the Alex bit, which was utterly horrendous. And from then on, every single one of the women at some point is naked.
Yeah.
And you read it and go, was it written by like a 13-year-old boy?
Yeah.
No, we know that.
No, it was written by the guy who was the architect of the 1995 Disability Discrimination Act.
Exactly. What was he thinking?
OBE.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just think, well, were they trying to sell it as a script? Just had loads of nudity in it for no
It
reason.
started as a screenplay.
And I think that's it. They probably went, right, we need like 3 attractive ladies in
Yep.
there. If at all I'll tell you what it reminded me of. You know the Extras episode with...
I've never seen it.
You've never seen Extras?
No.
So there's one with Picard in it.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart.
So Patrick Stewart's playing a version of himself.
Yeah.
He was telling Ricky Gervais about his idea for his new film.
Yeah.
He's going, and I've got these psychic powers. And so what happens is, I'm there just walking down the street, and because of my psychic powers, I just look across. There's a beautiful lady, and her clothes completely fall off, and I see everything. And his whole film, he was pitching it to Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
And he's going, and then, yeah, I'm just biking down the park. There's a couple of ladies playing volleyball. I make all the clothes fall off. And it was just, and it is really funny. It's well worth watching. And because he plays it so straight, it's brilliant. And his voice and everything. And that's what it reminded me of. It was like, and then Chris just happens to take her blouse off for no apparent reason. And and all the way through it, I was like, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely written for a market, but it did start out life as a screenplay written by John Brosnan.
And you said it's a film?
Yes.
Is it Proteus?
But the film, Proteus. The film wasn't made until 1995.
Oh, right.
So the film was made 13 years later. But, that said, Leviathan, the Peter Weller film, was made in 1989.
I've seen Leviathan.
Yeah, and it bears some very strange similarities, even though it's set on... Because The Abyss was a thing. So there was The Abyss, Leviathan, and Deep Star 6 all came out within like a year of each other.
I don't know if I've seen Deep Star 6.
Yeah, Deep Star 6 was the cheapest, done by Sean Cunningham, who was behind Friday the 13th movies.
Oh, right.
So Deep Star 6 is the cheapest, but possibly my favourite of the three. Because it's got Miguel Ferrer in it. Woo! Miguel Ferrer for the win, playing an arsehole. Give me some of that sweet Miguel Ferrer.
Has it got Ron Perlman in it?
It's not got Ron Perlman in it. I think it's got Barry Bostwick in it. or someone who looks a lot like Barry Bostwick. But I like Deep Star 6. But yeah, so Leviathan's set on like an undersea platform thing base. Yeah. But it's extraordinarily similar in that it's shape-shifting monster thing, much like the thing with special effects by Stan Winston. And it seems, we'll get to this obviously, but the scientist on board the station seems to maintain some of his consciousness when he's absorbed by it.
He does, yeah.
So, as is often the case with screenplays that rattle around Hollywood for a long time, they get seen by people and people take little bits and pieces out of them that they like and they end up turning them into their own scripts. Yeah. I think Leviathan, whoever wrote Leviathan, probably saw this script at some point.
Yeah, I think the thing about the whole, as you said before, the concept of like an oil rig, an empty oil rig, is always good. Yeah. And any horror film that has got a contained landscape is what you need. There's no escape from it. Yeah. That's why it's always great to shove something underwater.
That's right. Yeah.
Or, in space, Alien, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it's a really good concept. And it could have been a really gritty, quite interesting, you could have done a lot with it.
Yeah. I think
the ideas
good ideas.
Yeah, I was going to say the ideas and the actual concept and ideas not totally crap. I think if you had some decent characters that you actually cared about.
Yeah, I think there are some really interesting ideas in it, but it's executed as a one-shit book. Yeah,
schlock.
Yeah.
But the sex angle of it is a bit too much, I think.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts about that. We'll get to them a little bit later. But it's time for our second beer. Roll the D6. Roll the D6, and I'll just go and get the first one out the fridge that I see.
It's a 2 again.
Mango Lassie Heathen.
Yeah, at least it's not special, bro. I'm trying to think my kind of oil rig game was set in the... Because it was in England, wasn't it? And it was in the northeast.
Yeah, well, that Massive Project stuff was UK set, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there was something. Obviously, they were mining for some oil, obviously. Yeah, and I think it was some it was very similar to this actually, but
without the rep.
Yeah, and slightly different monster.
Yeah. So anyway, it sods off after the gunfire anyway. Everybody emerges from the rooms into the corridor to check what the fudge was going on. Then they almost shoot a bloke who emerges through a door, but it's an old dude in a white coat that the narrative explains looks like the scientist out of the Muppets.
That was the best bit for me. After that, it was... I can't get that image out of my head. I just imagine it was actually the scientist.
Every time Dr. Shelley is referred to, I can only think of
which
the
one? You're not thinking of Beaker, right?
No,
the guy with the bald one with the glasses. Yeah. It's totally him, isn't it?
Yeah, and in a way, I think it's extraordinarily lazy, Harry Adam Knight, but it's pretty good shorthand. The problem is, it makes me think that when I see the movie of this, he has to be that Muppet.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as it happens, I did pick up Proteus, the 1995 film of this. And
do we have to watch it later?
We can watch it later.
Yeah. Is it worth watching?
Beat for beat, there's a couple of little additions and a couple of little subtractions, but beat for beat, it's basically... You can tell that this was based on Brosnan's screenplay. The only two major changes...
Official? It is official, because it's the back of the book, isn't it?
Yeah, the back of the book, what does it say?
It's well Proteus.
It says, the basis for the cult film Proteus.
The cult
film.
The cult
yeah,
film
that's a bit of a
project.
stretch.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a stretch. If
it said the film.
yeah. I think if cult film means the 25 people who like and own it, then fair enough. Yeah, it's a cult film. The major changes they introduce a framing kind of device at the beginning where Craig Fairbrass. This was part of Craig Fairbrass's like trilogy of horror movies.
I'm trying to remember who he is.
It was like a post-opera. He played a guy called Dan in EastEnders. The other films, it's been in a lot of films. You know, you got these terrible like Football Factory movies.
Oh yeah.
When he gets to Football Factory 4, and they can't afford Danny Dyer anymore.
Yeah.
Craig Fairbrass will be in it.
Jeff Dyer is his cousin. Yeah.
And I think it's occasionally like voiced characters for computer games. I think probably the biggest payday he ever will have got was voicing a character in one of the Call of Duty games. Because he's got that kind of SAS voice.
Yeah.
You know. But do you remember a film called Beyond Bedlam in the early 90s?
It kind of rings a bell.
And it was like, this is the film that's going to relight the fire under the British horror industry. Blah, 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 blah.
Did it?
Elizabeth Hurley playing a neurologist.
It's a bit of a stretch.
Gets her baps out. And Keith Allen as a psychopath into whose brain Craig Fairbrass, the detective, and Elizabeth Hurley, the neurologist.
Yeah, it rings a bell.
Yeah, it was really terrible.
Yeah, it sounds great.
It was so bad. It looked like it was made for 10 bob and a pickled egg. It was fucking garbage. All of the money, 70% of the money probably went on paying Liz Hurley.
Yeah.
It was genuinely terrible. But I can remember for a while in the magazines, Beyond Bedlam. Whoa, amazing. It was fucking terrible. But so there was like these 3 films, and 2 of them were based on books by John Brosnan and Leroy Kettle. Yeah. One of them was, because they wrote under another pseudonym as well, and I can't remember the name, but Beyond Bedlam is based on one of those
Is it like
books.
a shell company thing, so nobody knows who you are?
Possibly.
It's like, we're writing under this shell company.
Well, weirdly, the books that they wrote, or they wrote under these pseudonyms, 3 movies have been made, and they didn't write many, but 3 movies have been made, all low-budget tat.
Yeah.
So Beyond Bedlam, Proteus, and Carnosaur. So the early 80s...
Let me guess what Carnosaur's about.
Well, the early 80s, Carnosaur, Harry Adam Knight book about genetically recreated dinosaurs, predates Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
So we could say that Michael Crichton ripped off Carnosaur.
You could.
Yeah.
You might hear from his solicitors.
Yeah, I'm going to. Oh, fuck it. Why not? He did. But anyway, Dr. Shelley, we find, he is.
The Muppet guy.
Yeah. Dr. Shelley the Muppet says that the noisy beast is Charlie.
Yeah.
Ah, Charlie. And what Charlie is, he says...
It don't make any sense, though, does it, why
No,
it's called Charlie?
It doesn't, and we never really get an explanation for why it's called Charlie.
Well, it's what's on the side of the tank, isn't it?
Mm. So the actual... Do they call it Phoenix in the book? Phoenix in the book, Proteus in the movie.
Yeah, Phoenix is the...
Yeah. And he says, it's a bit hard to explain what Charlie is. And, he's a little
no
bit
doubt
slippery.
Paul picks it up quite well.
Yeah.
With his background in spades.
Yeah, so he's not being particularly clear or helpful, is the doctor from the Muppets, the scientist from the Muppets.
Are you about to go for page 57?
No, I'm going to go for page 48.
Page 57 I've got as Doctor Exposition.
Yes, we'll get to that as well. But on page 48, so Dr. Shelley has asked him what the date is. And he says, still June? Shelley looked surprised. It seems so much longer since... His voice trailed away and his face went blank. Then he suddenly smiled at them and said, please forgive me, I'm not myself these days. Oh, not myself indeed. He started to laugh.
Not remotely suspicious?
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, foreshadowing.
Yes, just a little bit. I thought it was brilliantly foreshadowed.
Amazing that one can still retain a sense of humour in spite of everything. At least I think it's my sense of humour. He stopped smiling and blinked at them in surprise, as if he was just seeing them for the first time. We've got to get you off the rig, yes, as soon as possible, for your own sakes. Alex took a step forward and grabbed Shelley by the front of his coat. Listen, Professor, cut the bullshit and tell me what's going on here. And what is that goddamn animal that made such a racket earlier? Calmly, Shelley reached up, took hold of Alex's wrist and pushed his hand away. He did it without any visible effort, and Paul noted the look of surprise on Alex's face. The animal is where it can't disturb you again, I assure you. Now please return to your rooms. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Good night. And before they could react, he ducked back into the lab and closed the door. They heard the click of a lock, and then silence. Angrily, Alex began to bang on the door. Hey, Professor, we're still not finished with you yet. Open this goddamn door. but there was no response from inside and finally gave up. Now what do we do? He growled at Paul.
Paul shrugged. Do what he said, I guess. Brilliant. Let's all just go to bed, because that will be it.
Well, that's what they do. They just fuck off back to bed, don't they?
Exactly. Probably have sex. I can't remember.
Next day, no sign of Shelley.
Yeah.
Mark and Paul check out the lifeboat situation. Alex continues to be a dirty creep.
He does, yeah. So all the lifeboats are destroyed.
Mm-hmm. And Alex, whilst he's been a dirty creep and perving over the women, Paul and Mark are so unhappy with Alex, they actually talk about how they want to get rid of him, but lack the bottle to deal with him.
Yeah.
Turns out to be a mistake, as we'll find. I mean, it's been bad enough as it is. But they find a load of tapes. This is where we get to Basil exposition.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
There's loads of it, yeah.
They find the tapes and Dr. Shelley is on the tape.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So he's just basically narrating about genetically engineered sharks.
So he's on about, Phoenix, the mythical bird of fire that was reborn from its own ashes.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada. And then it says, it wasn't until they tried the fifth tape that they got something different. Hey, that's Shelley, cried Mark. It was Dr. Shelley, looking much the same as he had the previous night. He was talking directly into the camera, and from the background they could see he had made the tape of in this very room. Then Paul noticed for the first time a small video camera above the console which was almost directly facing him. Turn it up, urged Mark. Let's hear what he's saying. Paul found the volume control. If anyone can find the volume control, it's Paul.
Yeah, he knows his way around the security.
He knows his way around a VCR.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Shelley's voice filled the room. And so I must admit that my initial confidence in our resuming control of the situation seems to have been misplaced. Subsequent events have proved correct. The misgivings of Drs. Soames, Jameson and Englefield about our ability to subdue Charlie, or should we refer to it as Phoenix? He shook his head wearily. In a sense, it is the Phoenix unit that is behind all this. He paused and groaned as if in pain. Then he closed his eyes and began to rub the sides of his temples. Eventually he continued, I feel so tired, but then we all do. No one has dared to sleep for the last 48 hours now. It can move so fast. We've lost 11 more people since this morning alone. At this rate, how much longer will it be before it gets all of us? Durkins, of course, still wants us to call for help, but I definitely agree with the others on this. It must be kept isolated at all costs. We cannot risk offering it the means to reach the outside world. Though what will happen if it does destroy us all doesn't bear thinking about.
But then you have the other bit. So far, we've tried everything we've tried has failed. It appears to be vulnerable thanks to us. Fire, bullets, electricity, poison, acid have all proved futile. So they're sets up to the guys, Paul and Mark, the man with the addiction problem, going, oh.
Yeah. I said, then the screen went blank. And, at this point I'm thinking, the claustrophobic setup, the scientists, the nature of the beast, whatever it is, it's all quite familiar now when you look at this in 2024 because it's been done a bazillion times.
Yeah.
And there have been a number of movies, mostly 90s onwards, that really, really lean into this. Leviathan we've mentioned already, and The Abyss, and...
Well, it started off with a thing there, didn't it?
Yeah, it definitely started with a thing. And funnily enough, that concept about finding videotapes and watching back the contents. So this is written in 1983. Videotapes, video was around in the 70s, but only with people who had loads of money. It only really became a common thing for people in the early 80s. So the thing I think it's easy to forget that when you're watching The Thing in 1982, where they find the video cassettes from the Norwegian base, and they're watching all that, it's like, ooh, this is like really quite novel, novel idea. So this is written in 1983, and there's a little bit further on where they're watching the videos and the doctor responds to something off camera as if something's breaking into the room. This is all quite novel for the time. Now it's all like common lazy tropes, but even you know what? We need to try our mango lassie, don't we? Yeah. We'll get back to this point. That's actually really nice.
Yeah.
And doesn't taste its alcohol strength.
No, it's nice.
That's good. I like that. So I really like this basic concept, and obviously the world does, because Aliens uses the same concept. So you've got a familiar template, bunch of outsiders enter a doomed establishment to find that horrific death and body horror is underway.
But it goes back. It goes back if you think about forever. But even as a recent example, not recent, the Lord of the Rings film. So they find the massive book and go, oh,
Yeah.
they're coming, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
etc. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
like,
rips that off Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Oh, they're coming through the door.
Yeah.
Oh, pen tailed
yeah,
off.
yeah.
Yeah.
The horror. There's
Yeah.
a horror at the door. It was the horror at the door.
You know what? At the House of the Bar, I actually, you always used to say that about Lovecraft stuff. There was a thing on the doorstep.
Yeah.
It was the thing on the doorstep. I actually quoted you when we talked about the house on the borderland in our last episode.
But yeah, it was always that, wasn't it?
Yeah. So this book isn't exactly a great example of this in terms of execution.
No, it could.
But for a book from 1983,
it's got some.
It's a solid setup.
I would. Yeah,
It's got some good ideas, but with crap characters.
Yeah.
They're going to die anyway. And it's so short, it gets to the point of what it wants to be quite quickly and quite carefully.
I think it's definitely a screenplay made into a novel.
Yeah.
It's definitely cinematic, as in cinematic in an 80s low budget shit way.
Yeah.
You're almost writing it to appease to a certain audience in the 80s, which, you know, there was always, with horror films, there's always sex and nudity and everything.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be trying to do that as opposed to be a novel.
Yeah, well, I think that a point came where there was a bit of a war of escalation with this kind of book, because the 70s, you had James Herbert, you had Guy and Smith, you had a lot of these authors knocking out these books for New English Library and a host of other publishers. And you can see it in James Herbert books. In the 70s, his stuff is pretty strong already with the rats and the fog. You know, he calms down a little bit with more traditional ghost story type stuff like The Survivor. But in 1980, he releases The Dark, which again we covered, I think, last year or the year before for a Halloween episode. And he really fucking ramps up the nastiness.
Yeah.
Because you've gone through the 70s, and whilst all these pulp novels are getting knocked out in the 70s, there is a war of escalation between the authors. You now got Sean Hudson in on the act, who is, you know, who declared himself that he could write these books better than any of the guys had been doing in the 70s, because he was pretty arrogant and full of himself. I mean, I think he's wrong.
Was Clive Barker 80s?
Clive Barker was 80s, but I think Barker was coming from a different angle.
Yeah, totally.
But this is pure pulp horror, and they are pushing the envelope.
Yeah,
they are absolutely pushing the envelope of what is acceptable and what you can get away with in a novel that's going to go on the shelf in W.H. Smith's.
Yeah,
you know, and I think because of this massive horror boom in the 70s, nobody's really looking at any of it in detail. You know, and it's round about this time the video nasties craze is going on, and everybody's losing their fucking minds about quite innocuous. When you look at some of the video nasties,
that's like Texas
really
Chainsaw Massacre, isn't it? That was always held up to be one of them, wasn't it? And it was just like...
Yeah, but I could go in a shop age 10 in 1982 and go to the spinning rack in a newsagent's and buy this, or Wheels of Terror by Sven Hassel, or a Guy and Smith book, or, I mean, I mentioned Sabbath earlier. Guy and Smith was pushing the envelope by the time he's writing the Sabbath books, because he's written a lot of fucking wild shit in the 70s, and the more he pushes the envelope, the more successful his books get.
But it's like anything, isn't it? It's like the film industry, isn't it? I mean, the latest one is the Terrifier movies.
Yeah, I keep hearing mention of these and how successful they are.
Super low budget. It's made 3, hasn't it? The last one knocked Joker off the #1 film, and it's supposed to be like he when you interview the director, he's gone the low budget, but they are grotesquely horrific. You know, like ridiculous kills. He sees it as part of the whole almost 80s Grand Guignol kind of thing. Lots of people. It's the usual thing of people coming out throwing up after seeing it. It's like, it must take a lot to throw up at a film.
But this isn't new.
No, of course it isn't.
Do you remember when The Brood came out in the 80s, the David Cronenberg film? The TV adverts that promoted The Brood were of people rushing out of the cinema.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't remember The Brood, actually.
The Brood is a great film. It's classic Cronenberg, but it's Oliver Reed plays a psychologist who is using an unusual method of therapy on a woman played by Samantha Eggar, and she is giving birth to mutated children who are then going out and they're like dressed like the dwarf in Don't Look Now.
Yeah,
the small person.
Scary, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and these children are like, you know, going out and obeying the orders of the id of the mother's id,
that kind of rings
and murdering people with stake hammers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a really weird, good film. Classic Cronenberg in that period where it's post Scanners and Rabid, but pre The Fly. So just in that period, probably more pre Dead Zone. You know, he does the Dead Zone, as a director for hire, a big budget film based on a Stephen King book. And The Brood seems to sit just in that space in between his very Canadian weird body horror films and when he started doing more, not mainstream, well, yeah, mainstream, because he did The Dead Zone, he did The Fly, which was a remake.
Yeah, and then he did, what was the Dead Ringers?
Dead Ringers.
Dead Ringers is not mainstream, I think. Dead Ringers is mental.
Well, I think he probably ended up making Dead Ringers because The Fly made so much money, they were like, make us another film, David. And he made Dead Ringers.
They went, ooh, we don't like it, David, what are you doing to us?
Yeah.
But The Fly was minging, though, wasn't it? It's like, it had some really horrible bits in it.
The Fly there was 2 films when I was a teenager, when I was like 13, 14, that I saw in the cinema that made me feel sick. I wasn't sick, and I didn't run out of the cinema and be sick, but they made me queasy. One was The Fly, the bit where Jeff Goldblum pukes up on the guy's leg.
That's not very nice, is it?
And the other one was a bit in From Beyond. I saw From Beyond at Cecil Cinema in Hull with my mate Rob when I was like 13. And I can't remember which specific scene it was. But yeah, that made me feel a little bit nauseous, just because it was gloopy, gross practical special effects.
And The Hills of Eyes, I watched that when I was about 12. Didn't like that much when they, that was pretty grim.
Yeah, but to be fair, those films, seeing them as like a 13, 14-year-old, however old I was, gave me my taste for schlocky, practical special effects, sticky special effects driven, you know, gruesome horror films for a while.
That's the thing, isn't it? You kind of, they talk about Terrifier and it's hideous, and they talk about different shows being, pushing the boundary.
Yeah.
But it depends how it's delivered, doesn't it? If it's delivered in a jokey, kind of stupid way.
Yeah.
There's certain films I can't watch.
Yeah. And it depends what you're into at any specific time as well, because I'm more into... I went through a period, like I'm sure a lot of people did, was, the jump scare movies, like Paranormal Activity. I couldn't get enough of them. And now I just want something that unsettles me. I will quite happily watch a practical effects laden weird movie, not necessarily a gore movie with just like people getting cut and stuff like that. But there's a film called The Void. Have you seen The Void?
It don't ring any bells.
There's a bunch of guys who were part of a team of guys who made movies. They made a movie called Father's Day. They made Biocop. Well, actually, Biocop was an extended trailer. They made Manborg. Really amusing, low-budget films that were really, really out there. They made an incredible film called The Editor, which I absolutely loved. But one of the guys who was Astron 6. They're called Astron 6. And one of the guys who did a lot of the special effects for them has gone and he's been getting involved with making movies. He did a film called Psycho Gorman, which is fucking great. It's really, really funny. It's about like an alien super warlord who lands on Earth, and a little girl and her brother hold the key to controlling him, and they basically use him as their best friend. It's fucking brilliant. It's so funny, and the practical special effects and gore are absolutely amazing. But one of the guys involved did the special effects for a film called The Void, and it's like a Lovecraftian weird film with some of the greatest. It's not a perfect film, but it's got some really fucking weird, freaky, practical special effects that you're looking at it on screen thinking, what the fuck am I looking at? I don't know what I'm looking at, but it's really terrifying.
Yeah.
Really
I thought
good.
The Colour Out of Space was quite grim.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, yeah.
It's great. It's Nicolas Cage as well, so I watch most things with him.
And he's actually quite understated.
Yeah, exactly. Nicolas Cage being understated.
Yeah.
Still mostly
mental. But have you seen one called... I forget what it's called, but What the fuck is that film called? It's by a it's either a Japanese or Korean director. It's his first Western film. So he gets Nicolas Cage to be in it, and it's set in the future. It's post-apocalyptic. And Nicolas Cage gets...
it's not Mandy, is it?
No, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But Nicolas Cage gets... Basically, he's put in a leather suit that has little explosives next to his balls.
No, I've definitely not seen that.
And if he gets aroused, one of them will explode and blow one of his testicles off.
It seems quick.
And about 20 minutes into the film, one of his testicles gets blown off.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Oh, God bless Nicolas Cage. He'll do anything, won't he? He'll do anything.
But my favourite Nicolas Cage film recently is the one where he plays himself with Pascal.
Oh, Pedro Pascal, the unbearable summit or other of talent,
amazing.
massive talent.
That's one of the funniest.
That's the greatest buddy movie.
It's the funniest thing I've seen for years.
Yeah.
Just the bit where they're on acid trying to get over the wall.
Yeah, there's one shot which like goes into slow motion where they're driving down a road in an open top car, and Pedro Pascal turns to look at Nicolas Cage with a look of pure joy on his face.
It's amazing, yeah.
Because Pascal's playing like a hardcore gangster, and Nicolas Cage is his idol.
Yeah.
And he's just got this fucking look on his face where he's like in heaven because he's in a car with Nicolas Cage. Yeah. It is beautiful.
Honestly, when I watched that, I just didn't want it to end.
Yeah.
It was just like I could watch
the unbearable weight of massive talent.
Yeah,
yeah,
brilliant. Because Nicolas Cage, plays a rubbish version of himself, doesn't he? Yeah,
absolutely
hilarious.
Anyway, back to this terrible book.
Sorry. So we digress.
Yeah, Mark and Paul get a fresh reason to freak out because as they're in this room of CCTV monitors, they're surprised to see a blonde woman in a lab coat walking down a corridor on their level. So Paul heads out to find her because Paul's a take charge kind of guy.
He is.
And he leaves Mark alone to watch the screen in the CCTV room. And he says, he scanned the bank of monitors for the woman. There was no sign of her, so he started punching buttons at random, cutting to new cameras. Then he spotted her again. This time, she was walking towards the camera. She was wearing a white lab coat and had short blonde hair, but he couldn't make out her face. Mark frowned as he stared hard at the screen. The woman was getting closer now, but her face remained indistinct. Blurred even. Was there something wrong with the camera? A smear on the lens, perhaps? The woman continued to approach the camera. Then she was directly under it. Mark screamed. As the woman had walked by the camera, he had looked briefly up at it. She had looked briefly up at it. There had been no way for Mark to avoid the horrible truth. She had no face. She had no eyes. The round, staring eyes of a fish.
Well,
eyes straight out of eyes straight out of a nightmare. But that was all. The rest of her face was completely smooth. Oh yeah, sorry, that was my mistake. She had no face. Yeah. She had eyes.
She well had eyes, yeah.
She totally had eyes. The round staring eyes of a fish, as it happens.
Yeah, otherwise that would be
eyes
terrible.
straight out of a nightmare.
Yeah.
But that was all. The rest of her face was completely smooth. Paul caught a glimpse of her ahead of him as he turned a corner. Hey, he called, and started walking faster. He hurried round the corner and saw she was now only 10 yards or so in front of him. He called out again, but she didn't give any indication of hearing him. She continued on at the same fast pace. Paul broke into a run and caught up with her just before she reached the next corner. Hey, I want to speak to you, he said, grabbing her by the shoulder and pulling her around. Then he gave a gasp of surprise. Well, what is his gasp of surprise?
Gasp?
It turns out his gasp of surprise is because she's got a sensuous mouth, apparently.
Oh, of course she has. What page are we on?
61. So she's got a sensuous mouth, but back in the CCTV room, Mark has fainted. He screamed and fainted. He's freaked out when he comes round, of course, but Dr. Carol Soames is indeed very hot.
Yeah, well, she would be, wouldn't she?
Well, she would be. Yeah. And she probably only wears underwear under her
I would have thought so.
Yeah. So she explains, she's basically the lady version of Basil Exposition.
Yeah, she's
for about 3 million pages.
She's Basil too, isn't she?
Yeah, she is. She explains that Charlie is under control, that the rig and all the research is set up and funded by billionaire Lloyd J. Brinkstone, who was paranoid about mankind getting wiped out by a nuclear war.
Oh, of course he is.
Yeah, well, we all were in the 80s, weren't we?
Yeah.
So he set up an illegal genetic engineering project to create an artificial gene. Whereas we just got stoned.
I didn't.
Neither did I.
No, none of us did.
No.
We just like was very scared about
That's right.
things.
We just played Spectrum games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Manic Miner.
He's all about an artificial gene that will, and I quote, override the genetic code of the host body and enable it to adapt to drastic changes in the environment and survive lethal doses in radiation by undergoing rapid evolution.
Yeah. It seems quite reasonable, I thought.
Yeah. And then unfortunately, they grind to a halt on the exposition because she says, it's coming. She stood up quickly. I've got to get away. You stay here, you'll be safe here. It's me it's after. She began to hurry towards the door. Paul leapt to his feet, snatched up the M16 and followed her. Wait, don't go, he cried, making a grab for her arm. What happened next was totally unexpected. The girl spun round, grabbed the M16 out of Paul's hand and gave him a shove in the chest.
Shoved it right up his arse.
Yeah,
No,
it didn't look a very hard shove to Mark, but to his amazement, Paul literally flew backwards, through the air. He landed on the rack of videotapes, which tipped over and hit the floor with a loud noise. Fearing the worst, Mark rushed to him, but was relieved to see that Paul was still alive. Obviously, winded by the impact, he was gasping for breath. As Mark helped him to sit up, he choked, "The girl! Stop her!"
Oh, but it was too late. Even as Mark turned, he saw the door closing and heard a distinctive clink, because doors only open on one side.
That's right.
Yep. He ran over to it and found, as expected, it was locked. Shit, he cried. She's locked us in.
She's locked us in.
Oh, no.
This is happening a lot. This happened with Dr. Shelley, didn't it?
They've got one-way locks, haven't they?
Yeah. Now, over with the ladies, Alex is now being a drunk creep.
Oh, mate, yeah.
He gets violent, rapey, and knifey.
He drinks a bottle of whiskey and watches porn.
Mm-hmm.
Sings Bar Bar Baran for some ungodly reason.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a soundtrack to the porn film or whether he just likes the Beach Boys.
I don't know.
And then
I think it says a lot about people who like the Beach Boys.
I like the Beach Boys.
Oh, yeah. I take it back.
That sounds fucking brilliant.
I take it back.
It's a work of
yeah, it's all rather unpleasant.
Yeah, so basically Linda distracts him by showing her knockers to him.
Yeah.
He gets confused, he grasps, she smacks him over the head with a gun.
Yeah.
Again.
They escape, hide in a cupboard.
Yeah.
Rochelle is alone and she finds a big tank marked Carcharodon.
Yeah. Charlie.
And it's got
I'm still not convinced that.
No, it's a bit weird. And it's got a girl in it with black tendrils coming out of her mouth.
Yes.
And she turns and looks at Rochelle. Turns out we know this. Rochelle doesn't, because she's not seen Dr. Carol Soames. No. But it is hot babe Dr. Carol Soames. And she's coming for Rochelle, who, in her panic, falls over.
And there's
twice.
There's loads of analogies to rubbish horror films where people fall over.
Yeah.
Like a terrible 80s horror film.
Yeah.
She falls over.
Yeah, it's true.
It's like, you don't have to... Yeah, we get it.
Yeah. In a way, though, it turns out to be a good thing for Chris and Linda, because Alex was trying to batter his way into their cupboard to rape them at knife point.
Yeah.
We have to suppose. He doesn't say, I'm going to rape you at knife point, but that's the implication.
Yeah, he's not... Yeah, Alex is not a rounded character, is he?
No. But he hears Michelle scream, and he heads there instead. Bumps into the weird doctor in the hallway, where he offers, like a gentleman, to escort her to her room.
And
she's
she's really heavy.
Yeah, she's super heavy. Of course, he gets her to her room, he gets her on a bed, and then he tries to get jiggy with her.
Yep.
Because he's Alex, but it doesn't go particularly well.
Not ideal for him.
Says she opened her eyes. Who are you? Me? I'm Alex Rinaldo. Look, lady, you should get out of those wet clothes. You'll get sick. I suppose we should be trying to do bad American accents here, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, we could do.
Sick? She grimaced. Yes, I'll get sick, all right. Very sick. How'd you get all wet like that? You'll fall in a swimming pool or something.
Yeah, maybe not like that.
Yeah, all right, I won't do that.
Yeah.
Vaguely curious in spite of his main preoccupation. She didn't answer his question. When I did, I think it was Night of the Crabs, I did a German scientist accent, and by God, I stuck with it. But it wasn't successful, I don't think.
No.
You'd better get away from this place, Alex, as fast as you can. Thinking she was telling him to leave her cabin, Alex immediately became more aggressive. Hey, lady, that's no way to talk to the guy who just helped you. You should show some gratitude. She sighed and closed her eyes.
Some gratitude.
Go, fast, as far away as you can. I'm not going anywhere, lady. Not least until after I've got you out of those wet clothes and we've had some fun. He grabbed the front of a lab coat with both hands and began to rip it open. I got the shock of his life.
Oh, did he?
The coat appeared to be attached to her, As he pulled it open, it was like peeling skin off an animal. The underside was all red and sticky, and the bare flesh looked as if it had been flayed. The woman gave a terrible scream and sat bolt upright on the bed. Alex screamed too. Then in a panicky reflex action, he reached for the knife in his back pocket, flicked open the 6-inch blade, and drove it straight into her heart. Her body gave a galvanic shudder and she fell back. The scream became a hoarse, bubbling rattle, then silence. Already Alex had flung himself off the bed and was backing out of the doorway. For a brief moment he considered retrieving his knife, but then he saw that something was oozing out of a chest around the hill. Not blood, but something that looked like black slime. A terrible stink began to fill the cabin. He turned and fled. Oh my God. So it's all falling into place. I think we've got enough indications now that the survivors are all Charlie. Shelley is Charlie. She's Charlie. They've got enhanced strength. It's the thing on an oil rig, sort of. Again, more and more, feels like the Leviathan was a big rip-off of this screenplay. Anyway, Paul and Mark are in the CCTV room, having made no effort to help Linda and Chris. They're watching Alex trying to break into the cupboard where Linda and Chris are. Yeah. And they're like, I thought I'm going to help.
Yeah, but unfortunately this door. How do we get
out? I'm
too
weak to open a door.
How can we get out of this door?
Yeah. But Alex bursts in, full of like, what the fuck, you guys? You'll never guess what I just saw kind of energy.
Yeah.
But Paul smacks him in the chops.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, okay, fair enough, quite satisfying.
To rape my girlfriend.
Yeah, but he smacks him in the chops so hard, Alex he takes it quite well.
Yes, all right. Then.
Insisting that he has to show them the weird woman he stabbed.
Yeah.
But when they get there, his switchblade is there, but there's no woman and no blood.
No.
But there is a very sharp shock when a guy with an M16 turns up.
There is, yeah.
And gives them a scare. And it's Ed Buckley.
It is.
A security guy who, in the film Proteus, is played by Rico Ross. I was like, oh, it's so nice to see Rico Ross get some work. Because Rico Ross played Frost in Aliens. Right? Frost is the guy who has to carry everybody's ammunition and gets flamethrowered and falls over the railing and blows up. And I was like, I went off to Rico Ross. I'm like, oh, Rico Ross, it's so nice to see you get some work. And the other thing I mostly remember him for is is it the Day to Day or Brass Eye, where the guy wants to get electrocuted on the toilet. It's Steve Coogan plays a guy who wants to. His method of execution that he chooses is he wants to fill himself up with cheeseburgers till he hits a certain weight and the toilet electrocutes him. Right. And while he's doing it, Rico Ross plays the Marine bandsman who sings him to his death. by singing When the Saints Go Marching In or something. I remember watching it going, it's Rico Ross. Rico Ross is on Brass Eye. Oh, lovely. But before they can really get into things, there's a gunshot. They run down to where Linda and Chris have found a soaked and terrified Rochelle. But even then, it's like, the gunshot, what's going on?
Yeah.
Linda fired the gun by accident.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she can't handle a 38. Can't trust a woman with a gun, obviously. And finally, with everybody together, the scenario with Alex trying to rape Linda and Chris, we finally get close to a reckoning. And this is the stupid point. Paul, the leader, is like, he was going to rape us. They were watching it on CCTV, and Paul was like, you were going to rape them?
Yeah. He's not the brightest, is he? He's not got the leadership qualities you'd hope for.
No, he's the worst. And I can see why in the film they were just like, fuck this, let's make Alex not rapey.
Yeah.
Make Craig Fairbrass Alex and make him the main dude instead. But Buckley starts to panic, says Charlie's coming, and everybody with guns should get ready.
Yep.
Now I think we've had enough tips by this point to know what's coming. The room was suddenly plunged into darkness. The only source of light was from the open doorway. Buckley hurried back across the room and crouched down behind a chair, near Rochelle. It's near, very near, he hissed. But the only thing Paul could hear was the thumping of his heart. His eyes were fixed on the oblong of light that was in the doorway. Any moment now it would be outlined there. I still don't hear a fucking thing, said Alex hoarsely. He was sprawled on the floor behind an upturned coffee table. Mark and Chris were huddled in the corner to the right of the door. Shh, ordered Paul. There was silence. Still issuing orders.
He is,
He's a cop, but he's still issuing orders.
He's got all the orders.
Yeah. Paul strained to hear any sound from the outside, but there was nothing. It's coming, whispered Buckley. You've got to kill it. Promise me you'll kill it no matter what happens to me. I'm finished anyway, I know that now. Paul was too occupied with watching the doorway to pay any attention to what Buckley was saying. His finger was locked around the trigger, ready to fire the instant the creature, Charlie, or whatever, stepped into sight. It's close now. Closer.
Oh,
Buckley's
God, where is it?
went on. Then he said, "It's here." What could it mean?
Where could it? But nobody's seen anything. Yeah. What's going on?
Paul jumped, but the doorway remained empty. Rochelle screamed. Paul glanced sideways and froze with horror. Where Buckley had been crouched, a dark shape was now standing and growing. It was already over 7 feet tall, but as Paul watched, the shape grew even taller. He had no idea what was going on, but he swung the barrel of the M16 round towards the apparition. Beside him, he heard Linda gasp as she caught sight of what he was seeing too. The shape had turned slightly and the dim light from the doorway illuminated part of it. Paul had never seen anything like it before. The face, if you could call it that, was long and smooth, except for 2 large round eyes that seemed horribly blank and lifeless.
Looked like Beaker from the Muppets.
It did. You should have just said that, shouldn't you? At the bottom of the face, there was an eruption of small, squirming tentacles, which parted suddenly to reveal an impossibly wide mouth full of triangular teeth. It looks just like the Pobblybogs from In the Night Garden.
I've got a thing with this, right? So it's basically based on the genetics of a shark.
Yep.
Where are the tentacles coming from?
Oh, well, you know.
Tentacles, schmentacles.
No, never has to throw a bit of Lovecraft into that, is it? So, yeah.
Sharky, toothy.
Yeah, it was over 8 feet tall, its head almost brushing the ceiling, it had no neck, yada, yada, yada. Rochelle, still screaming, tried to crawl away from it. It noticed her immediately and lashed out with one of its arms. Rochelle was scooped up off the floor and flung backwards against the wall. She bounced off it with a bone-jarring thud and lay moving at the thing's feet. This had the effect of snapping Paul out of his frozen state. He took careful aim at the creature's head and pulled the trigger. It jerked as the bullet struck home but didn't fall. Instead it turned on Paul, with an even more deafening screech of rage began to advance towards him. "I'm going to die," thought Paul as the creature approached him, but he kept firing. At the last moment it halted. It had been hurt, at least. 2 more guns opened up. Linda's and Alex's. Mark and Chris were rooted to the spot, unable to move. The thing bellowed with pain and lurched towards the door. They couldn't let it get away again, thought Paul. They had to kill it. He kept his finger hard on the trigger, but then realised his gun was empty.
Oh,
what? My God.
Yeah, mate.
Poor Rochelle, number one.
Yeah.
She comes a cropper. At this point, they seem to have got off quite lightly, considering... At this point, we consider... I was thinking, is this thing like the Thing? Because in the Thing, they're all like individual organisms. As soon as like even a fucking molecule of blood gets separated from
it goes.
It can become basically a separate creature. But the next chapter explains things a little bit, or gives us a little bit of a clue. This is the first really interesting bit. It says,
after 89 pages.
Oh, well, you know, okay, there's some interesting concepts. But this is the bit I kind of like about it, because it says Shelley's mind was in a turmoil of despair. Everything was going wrong. They were losing control and it was getting stronger. There, he gave a bit of laugh. He was practically on his own now. Oh, there were still Durkins and a couple of others, but he doubted if they would last for much longer. Carol Soames had been his last strong ally, but she too had given way under the strain. What on earth had she thought she was up to trying to get off the rig, poor girl? She couldn't accept the fact that she was finished. And when that stupid young thug had stabbed her, it was the final straw. To die twice was too much for any mind. Her last layer of sanity had been stripped away. Now she was like all the others. He could still sense their presence, the mad ones, the ones whose mind has collapsed as soon as they had realised what had happened to them. The reality of their situation had been too awful for them to accept. Now they wandered around like feeble, hysterical ghosts. Would he go that route too? It was possible. Where the last thread of control had slipped from his grasp, he would be at the mercy of it, and then insanity would be the only refuge. If only they could have kept it on its leash long enough for the young intruders to get away. But Carol's violent death had ruptured something. It had come to the surface much more quickly, and Shelley had known right away it was stronger, much stronger, and worse still, it was getting more intelligent. Was there a spillover from all the trapped human minds? Were the insane ones actually fragmenting as individual personalities and becoming part of it? Whatever the answer, it boded ill for all of them, especially the 6 young intruders. He doubted if he could keep it from them for very much longer. All these poor people have been absorbed into Charlie, but still retain some semblance of self. So it's like this sort of gestalt, which I think is a really interesting idea, because it's increasingly made up of the people who've been absorbed, whose minds are fractured, and some become increasingly dominant. And this is actually a really great idea. I like this idea, because with the Thing, something that isn't really explored is how the mentality and the thought processes of the thing or the things work, because until the point where they reveal themselves or are revealed or discovered, they behave like flawlessly, like the person the thing is imitated. So do they even know at that point that they're a thing, or a thing up till the point that they start changing and attacking other people? Or are they just incredibly sly and manipulative and Machiavellian? How do they work? They're completely alien, so we shouldn't really be able to get our heads around it. But with the thing, the film, because it's like a perfectly executed movie and concept, it doesn't really matter. You don't really need to know.
No, you don't.
Because the mystery's
too much going on, isn't
Yeah.
there?
But if you're going to rip it off,
Yeah.
then why not give some thought to how it works when someone does get absorbed or taken over by it? And that's where I think this book has... I've got to respect it, because it's actually taken an interesting angle on what it means to be absorbed by Charlie. And we get Shelley's POV on a couple of occasions. I think that's quite an interesting concept.
Yeah. I think that as an idea is good.
Yeah.
I don't think it links to it being genetically modified from a shark.
No.
That's the thing. It's like it's almost like I've got this idea. Let's like meld them together, and you could have probably got a better book by sticking to one of the ideas.
Yeah, I mean, Deep Blue Sea is a similar concept, isn't it?
Yeah, genetically
engineered sharks with human brain, DNA, yada. It works for a schlocky movie.
Yeah.
But for a book, you maybe want a little bit more. I don't know. Do you want a little bit more? Or are you happy with it the way it goes?
I don't think the ideas of the book are the problem.
Yeah.
I think it's just how it's written.
It's the execution. Yeah. It's a one shit book, isn't it? And there's no depth to any of it. It's got some great ideas.
Yeah, good ideas, never explored. There's never any... If it was done now, you'd probably have... The majority of the book would be the people in the scientists, wouldn't it, really? And then you have potentially somebody else coming in. I don't know.
Yeah. Right, before we go on to the final stretch, you need to roll that dice.
If it's a 2 again,
well,
4.
I hate to spoil anything, but when I get to the fridge, it's just going to be the first beer I see. Now, I didn't mean that. Obviously, there's no specific order to this.
Those 2 were alright.
Well, gird your loins.
What's this really weird noise?
That is the puppies next door. Well, they're not puppies, they're dogs, and they're absolute mentalists.
They don't seem very happy.
It's whenever their owner goes out
or
comes home,
no.
they have absolute meltdowns. Yes, that's right. Number 4 means
you make
gold
me read
label
a shit book.
Barley wine.
I don't think I can drink it.
Well, you haven't even tried it yet.
I'm going to drink it out of the can. I just remember barley wine from the olden days.
Yeah, but, and bear with me here. In the olden days...
Have we got any snacks to take away the flavour?
I've got some pork pie, some Scotch egg and some haggis.
Excellent.
Oh, and some peanut butter pretzels. Yeah. In the olden days, the only beer that you got that was anywhere approaching these kind of strengths were Carlsberg Special Brew, Tennant Super,
hideous,
Kestrel, whatever the fuck it was called. Kestrel, Kestrel did one as well.
What was the 1080 one?
Yeah, Tennant's did a super strength. Kestrel did a super strength.
The Kestrel one was the black can, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was
that
Carlsberg
was a cheap
Special
one.
Brew.
It was hideous. Yeah.
Whereas now, I mean, we've been drinking 13% porters.
Yeah.
So really, an 8% barley wine. This is weaker than the stout that we started with. Yeah. So I think we need to just go for it, and we might be pleasantly surprised. That's actually all right.
It's not hideous.
No, that's all right.
That's actually all right. Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah.
It's not like you're probably right. We've got that taste bud thing now.
Yeah, our palates have been trained.
Yeah. Okay, I'll pour it in the glass.
Our palates have been trained. And let's face it,
it's a bit gaseous because it's lager.
Yeah. You know, it's considering we've had like 13% Russian Imperial smoked porter.
Possibly the worst drink I've ever had.
Yeah. Yes.
Top 3.
Did go down the sink.
Yeah. 25 quid. Anyone's money. The top 3 are that one. We've gone through it.
What are our top 3 bad beers? Russian Imperial smoked porter. Number one.
Tastes like ashtrays.
Yeah,
with
fucking
porter
awful.
in it. That was disgusting.
Yeah.
The oyster stout.
That's before we even started podcasting, wasn't it? That goes.
Was
back.
it?
Yeah, that's
was that for pleasure?
That was when we were gaming at Stu and
Was it?
Sarah's. Yeah,
Fuck.
that was for when we were doing a Ramsey game.
I thought
We
we'd
went to
actually-
that beer off around the corner and got oyster stout,
I thought
and
we'd
it went
actually
down the
done that.
sink.
Oh, mate, that was disgraceful.
That was awful. That was Stu and Sarah's kitchen.
Yeah.
That was bought for pleasure
Yeah.
for a game night.
Right. Mushroom stout.
Mushroom stout.
Do you remember that one? It was utterly disgusting.
I remember having a mushroom sour in a beer hall in Manchester. I know the last time we recorded, when Phil was with us in your kitchen, we did put one down the sink, but I can't remember what it was.
Oh, what was that one?
Can't remember. I think I've repressed the memory. It was fucking foul, whatever it was.
Yeah, I've still got that amaretto sour. That was quite nice. I think.
Oh yeah, that was alright.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, gold label barley wine.
Yeah, it's actually
Well done.
It's not actually unpleasant.
Yeah, there's a reason why this has been around since before we were born. This is the stuff that you remember when you used to go in a pub when we were like 16,
Yeah.
and in the fridge.
Well, I didn't because Lutz about 12.
Oh, right. But when you were 18, then,
Yeah.
you remember there were the little bottles of barley wine that had the gold foil on them.
Yeah.
This is the stuff.
I'm trying to think who the audience for barley wine is.
It was for me. It was old timers. So, we moved to that village, didn't we, when I was a teenager?
Yeah.
And in the boozer in there, it was like hardcore old timers who would drink the gold label
remember
barley
the
wine
barman,
with the foil.
He was brilliant.
He worked on oil rigs.
Did he?
Yeah. When we used to go in the Sun Inn,
Yeah, he was
that guy where would say, right, we want flaming drambulas now, and he'd go, coming right up.
Flaming Drambulas, there was back in India. It was fighting. So
Yeah, we sat in that lounge one afternoon. He opened up at 12. We went in about 2 o'clock. There was me, you, and Neil, and we just went along. All the weird old spirits that he had that hadn't been touched, that were gathering dust. We just went along. We went along the line, and everyone we had, he was like, "Yeah," and he had one as well. And by tea time, he was arsehole. He was like the landlord in the Crag.
Yes,
Neil and I.
exactly that. In fact, I can't even differentiate him from the landlord from With Neil and I.
Yeah,
Because the other one, crack of the mig.
Crack of the mig, eh? No, just put me down yet.
But I think there was 2 drinks that me and you when we went to that pub. Sheridan's was one of them, wasn't it? So we had Sheridan's shots.
What was just sugar?
Yeah. Possibly diabetes.
Yeah, that's probably why. That explains a lot.
It was all the Sheridans.
Yeah.
What was the other one? There was 2 drinks that we used to have. I can't remember what the other one was.
Oh, I don't remember. I remember us having flaming drambulas in
Yeah.
there. Oh dear.
Great days.
Great days.
Ah, great days.
Yeah. Anyway, where were we?
Oh God, we're still on this book. I thought we're finished.
So the gang have twigged that Carcharodon means shark now. So part of the experiment means splicing.
But I still
shark
don't get
DNA.
Carcharodon to Charlie.
No, I don't really.
It's a bit lazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You could have got Carl would be better.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Carl,
yeah.
is
Or Cark.
Yeah.
Good old Cark. Yeah.
Maybe not Cark. But
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, Mark needs more smack from Alex.
He does.
And poor Rochelle undergoes the experience that many with the rig went through when they turned to slime.
Yeah.
This is one of the other things that I thought was quite neat, was she, in full consciousness, realises that she's turning to slime. She's being slimed by the Slimer. And this experience to go through when they leave the clothes behind. But, like sort of a neat indication of just how awful this fate is. She's aware it's happening, but at the point she's ready for oblivion, it doesn't come because we know she's now just part of the Charlie Gestalt.
Yeah.
And I like that. It's a really horrific concept. Again, I think that little passage is actually executed quite well. It's an unsettling concept. I think it's executed quite well. Paul, meanwhile, is watching loads more tapes full of exposition.
Yeah, Basil exposition.
Yeah, that tell us what we know already, but with more technological and biological explanations of how the
DNA and RNA.
Yeah.
What's RNA?
But so you've got these explanations of how the victims of Charlie are absorbed and how Shelley's experiences and theories of how the memories of victims are retained, which we've kind of got an idea about now because of the POV section.
They've got a lot to answer for, those scientists, haven't they?
They have, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're everywhere playing around with sharks.
Yeah, meanwhile, Alex, who said, yeah, you can have some more heroin if I can have some more rough blowjobs off Chris. But Mark's like, no. So
I'd rather do without.
So he goes to bed with Rochelle, who's been waiting for him. Yeah. And at this point, it's like, nice to think, well, yeah, fuck you, Alex, you piece of shit. You get what you deserve.
Yeah.
Because Rochelle is now part of Charlie as well. Unfortunately, we know how Charlie works now. So we know that Alex getting done in by Charlie doesn't necessarily mean the end of Alex.
No.
And that leads us to what is potentially the worst
the
part of the
grimmest
book.
Bit of the whole thing.
Yeah, but unfortunately our protagonists are being pretty fucking dumb now, and even while Rochelle is being naked and vague.
Yeah.
She's like wandering around naked going...
Well, that's kind of the default thing for a lot of the female characters, isn't it? Naked and vague.
I suppose so, yeah.
It's like, my clothes have all fallen off again.
Yeah.
And I've seen everything.
Yeah. But at this point, you would think that they would start to get paranoid.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that Rochelle seems to be alright.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, Rochelle's naked. Yeah.
I put a jumper on, it's really cold.
Yeah.
And seems to, her ankles are alright.
They do start to follow some story beats from The Thing, though, and like other films like Alien, The Jury Rig, Flamethrowers, yada, yada. And then, sadly, Chris learns the truth of how paranoid she should have been the hard way, and Charlie struck Alex is even more vile than we could have possibly feared, and he rape kills her in the worst part of the book.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely hideous. It's like, well, why? What are you on about?
It's just, it's that envelope pushing thing.
Yeah.
Again, it's fucking horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
I mean, fortunately, because it's a short book, it's brief, because everything in this book is brief.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a sad feature. And we were saying before that they were pushing the envelope, with the 70s, all the competition, they're pushing the envelope, all this stuff, and they're looking at how nasty they could get, particularly with sexualised violence, and James Herbert was doing the same thing as well. This is a perfect example of how by the 80s it's getting really just uncomfortable and explicit. It's not nice. And for me, it does detract from the book. Weirdly, this was, I think, Brosnan and Kettle's first outing under this pseudonym.
Yeah.
And we did The Fungus, which was a couple of years later. And that really is thankfully quite free of the extremities that we find in this book. So I'm hoping it was just a one-off, but I haven't read Carnosaur and I haven't read Bedlam. I'm hoping Carnosaur being about reconstituted dinosaurs.
It's probably, not that.
Will hopefully be free of it, but I don't know about Bedlam. But unfortunately, the Alex part of the Charlie monster is in ascendancy for a period of time. So instead of a DNA-altered shark-human hybrid monster comprising the multiple victims of its rampant hunger to absorb, it's now a horrifically rapey DNA-altered shark-human hybrid monster comprising the multiple victims of its rampant hunger to absorb, but do it by raping.
But with a penis the size of a baby's arm. That is the description.
It's
really.
Yeah.
There's another bit where Rochelle's talking about her relationship with Alex at one point, and she say, in character says something. Something Chris the feminist wouldn't agree with. It's like fucking hell. It's like, mate.
Yeah.
There was that bit which is a bit. Yeah, it's all a bit crass, bluff and gittish, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing's modus operandi, or even the aliens' modus operandi in Alien, as if that isn't suggestive enough, because it's figurative rape of a person. The thing is, it rips through your clothing, it invades your body, it imposes itself on you, it takes over, you've got no power over it. In Alien, it's the same thing. So if you're going to rip the stuff off, the answer is to make it more threatening. The answer to make it more threatening is just to make the rape absolutely literal.
It's just no. And the thing is, it's always against the women, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it. It's a DNA shark alien monster.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be a sexist knobhead as well.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, there are a couple of moments where you do get some existential horror. Again, we get a POV part of Shelley's consciousness inside Charlie. It says, Shelley was floating at the bottom of a black sea of infinite proportions. He was hiding. It was looking for him. Shelley knew he couldn't survive for much longer. The others were all gone now. He was alone. It was a disturbing new stage in the thing's development. As he had feared, it was absorbing their very personalities in the same way that it had taken over their bodies. And in the process, it was becoming intelligent itself. It was using their experiences, their thoughts, their memories to build a single new mind around the original primitive shark mind. The Phoenix DNA stroke RNA decided in some unfathomable manner to add intelligence to its already formidable range of survival tools. And that single gestalt mind was undoubtedly evil. As a scientist, Shelley didn't like to use the word evil, but he had no choice. It would have been bad enough with only the central shark personality involved. While not inherently evil, its voracious primal drive certainly made it inimical to human beings, whatever its physical manifestation. But the inclusion of that disgusting thug Alex had brought a strong, almost overwhelming element of genuine evil to the psychic stew. Shelley shuddered mentally at the memory of the things Alex had done when he'd been in control of the group body. That poor girl, Shelley had briefly come in contact with Alex's mind and found it indescribably loathsome. It was full of seething hatred and a desire to cause pain for pleasure. Perhaps he had led a sheltered life, but it had come as a shock to him that another human being could think like that. The horrible thing was, if the creature caught him, he too would become part of that cauldron of malign emotions. Alex would become a part of him. So there's still that interesting concept that Shelley is inside it, but his consciousness is still trying to evade being pulled into all this horrific stuff. And the fact that you've got a true psychopath has now become part of this gestalt is a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And it could have easily have been done without resorting
to unpleasantness.
To that level of unpleasantness.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the paranoia kicks into gear finally. It's quite effective, particularly when Chris has the realisation she's been got. And Mark decides to shoot up with Smack as he gets got by the black slime. That leads to an interesting encounter between Paul and Linda, our sole survivors now, and Charlie. But it's all gouged out.
Yeah.
And Paul realised that it's high on Mark's Smack. And we get a funny twist when, as they're trying to escape through the Warren tunnels, they run into a guy in overalls with a flashlight. Paul just shoots him.
which is
a bit of a bummer. But only finds out that when he gets on deck, there's a helicopter there and he's shot the pilot.
Yeah.
That was quite nice. There's a few more twists comes as well.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they realise there were two because Linda spots a second helmet in the cockpit. So the impact of that twist is short-lived. But the book is rattling to a close now. And it remains quite twisty-turny right to the end. And there is a final encounter with Shelley, who managed to take control thanks to the Smack and tells them that the heroine's killing the creature.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's no more Alex manifestations. But there is a pretty cool scene where they force the other pilot to take off and get away with all the tapes as evidence. But this final twist, which I think is really vivid and quite visual and I quite enjoyed, where the pilot of the helicopter, they're talking to him, and all of a sudden his face just becomes one big eye.
Yeah.
And his talks are going, ha, 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 we're headed for the mainland now. And tells them that the Charlie has adapted to the point where up until this point it's been a single organism, but actually in order to overcome the fact that it was completely fucked on heroin, it actually got hold of this pilot and implanted some kind of weird embryo into him.
It reproduced, didn't it?
Yeah.
That was the thing. It couldn't reproduce at one point.
Yeah, so it's developed this capability and it's going to spread to the mainland. I just really like that image of them panicking, thinking, oh shit, they're in a helicopter with the pilot.
Yeah.
With the force to take off at gunpoint because he knew they'd killed his co-pilot. And all of a sudden his face is just one giant eye.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a real strong visual.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
If it weren't for the fact that Paul was so immensely bland, I would have maybe have cared.
Yeah, but it's another example of one of the points where there's stuff in this which visually in a movie, unfortunately it's not, probably easy to reproduce in a film like Proteus. But the stuff in this, which is for a screenplay for a movie in 1982 or 83, is really quite strong and vivid and a cool visual idea. But, ultimately, I think it's Linda says, are you sure you don't want some heroin? He's like, no, I don't need any heroin.
Oh, it's a bit Moorish.
Yeah, so she just gives him a lot of heroin. And he absorbs the heroin and goes, bleh, and just turns to slime.
That was the thing, but the heroin thing was why it was the foreshadowed with the
Yeah.
first scene, wasn't it? Where he didn't kill Mark because he was high or whatever, or he wasn't. I don't know. It didn't make a lot of sense. But he was always through the heroin stuff.
I think it's another good, strong idea. It's like, what would happen to the Thing if it absorbed someone who was smacked out their head?
Yeah.
Would the Thing get smacked out of its head?
Yeah, and then crave that thing,
Yeah.
and didn't know it was bad for it.
Yeah.
That was the whole concept.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the whole book is a drug analogy.
Yeah.
About the terrible effects of heroin on society.
Yeah.
So well done. Bravo.
Well done, Harry Adam Knight.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
We take it back.
Yeah, Harry Adam Knight. But it does end on a sequel tease anyway, because the Charlie pilot eye face monster absorbs the smack, turns to goo,
gets booted out the
helicopter, and then Paul suddenly realises that this pedal does this, and this lever does that, and if they can find another oil rig, they might survive. So the ditch near another oil rig get rescued from the water. The helicopter sinks with all the videotapes on board, and the final passages are from Linda's point of view going, oh no one will believe us now because we've lost all the videotapes, and what if that thing is still alive and makes it to the mainland? This is only the beginning. So we've got sequel tease.
We have, luckily, I'm hoping there wasn't a sequel.
Well, yeah, there wasn't. There was no sequel novel because it was never reprinted until about 20 million years later. And Proteus wasn't made till 1995, and it was meant for 10 bob and a pickled egg and starred Craig Fairbrass.
And the sequel went, I think we're all right.
Yeah.
I don't think we need much more of this.
Yeah. So, Loz, final thoughts on Slimer, which I forced you to read for Halloween.
I kind of had some good ideas. Yeah. I think it was badly executed. The main characters were all incredibly rubbish.
Yeah.
Particularly Paul, who annoyed me because he was supposed to be the hero of the piece.
Yeah.
With no charisma, smarts, or anything.
Yeah.
Alex was the pantomime villain, but he was basically a sex-obsessed super knobhead. Yeah. The rest of them were just a bit bland, weren't they?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, take the Thing, put it on an oil rig.
Yeah, which is a great concept. You know, if you're going to make a B movie, anything to do with the Thing or aliens or whatever it is, lob it into a small enclosed place. Yeah. You saw it. It's great.
Yeah.
But
add some female characters, some rape, some stultifyingly perfunctory dialogue.
Yeah.
The scientist from the Muppets.
Yeah.
Change it from a space alien to the results of an experimentation in shark DNA, and you've got Slimer.
Yeah, which I don't think, all of those add up to a true winner.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit rubbish in terms of execution. It suffers from the problems that a lot of these books were suffering from, where they thought they had to push the envelope. But it does have a couple of things going for it. It's short.
Yeah, I like the shortness of it.
Yeah, it's got some interesting ideas. I like the idea that people absorbed by Phoenix / Charlie maintain that level of consciousness and recognition that they're trapped within it and all the horrors that go along with it. That's genuinely
That was good, yeah.
As bad as that is, the reflections of one of the scientists trapped in the Gestalt on how much worse it is when the psychopath knobhead joins them is an interesting angle. If they'd have done that without the rapiness, that would have been nice. And the perspective of the heroin addict as he is absorbed, plus the impact on the Slimer creature as the result of the heroin, is an interesting beat. And it did make me appreciate how much I appreciate the Thing for not going with the lazy, the humans are the real villains trope.
Yeah.
That so many things would go with, because that's generally the point of all. Just about every zombie film ever made.
Well, it's every film, isn't it? But apart from, I suppose the Alien film, you could argue that humans are the main villains because you've
corporate
got
greed,
attorney, etc.
Yeah.
But the Thing is just some dudes in the snow, isn't it?
Oh, that's why it's such a it's a near perfect film.
Yeah, I need to watch the Thing again.
It's a near perfect movie.
I didn't watch the remake ever.
Because... Well, it wasn't a remake, it was a prequel.
Was it?
Yeah.
No, I didn't watch the prequel then.
Well, it claimed to be a prequel. I suppose it's a remake, stroke prequel, whatever. It's about the Norwegian base.
Yeah, is it? Right.
Yeah, so...
Is it any good?
I think it has some interesting ideas in it. The biggest problem with it is, what I understand happened is that Studio ADI did, and funny enough, the same thing happened in Alien Romulus. Studio ADI, although it was Alec Gillis, not Studio ADI. Alec Gillis from Studio ADI, I think, was the main supervisor on Alien Romulus for the special effects. They put lots and lots of work into animatronics.
Yeah.
And you can actually watch some Studio ADI videos on YouTube where you can see them working with the animatronics for the Thing prequel. And the studio insisted that they didn't like it, and they basically covered all of the animatronics up with CGI.
Right, okay.
And in most cases, the CGI looks terrible. Because...
I thought Romulus is alright.
Well, the bits in Romulus that I'm referring to is they made an animatronic of Ian Holmes' likeness.
Oh, yeah.
For Rook.
Yeah.
But then they end up overlaying it with CGI that gives it the Uncanny Valley problem.
Yeah.
Whereas it's absolutely fine for this damaged android to look like an animatronic.
Yeah.
Because an android is an animatronic.
Yeah.
So let it look like an animatronic.
Yeah.
But instead, all of the amazing work that they did creating this animatronic is completely obliterated by a deepfake of Ian Holm.
But I really thought that, I mean, I like Romulus. There was some good bits to it. Some of it were like, really?
Yeah.
But I didn't get why you put Ian Holm in it.
Yeah.
I don't understand what it brought to the proceedings.
I don't mind the idea of having a damaged android that looks like it's from the same product line as the Ash android.
Which is fine.
But keep it as an animatronic. Keep it as an animatronic. So that you can recognise that it's from the same product line, but it's a fucking damaged android that's been ripped in half. So in Alien 3, you've got the remains of Bishop in the trash heap.
Yeah, that was fine, yeah.
And you know it's an animatronic.
Yeah.
But it's fine that it's an animatronic.
Yeah.
If you then went back to that and overlaid it with a deepfake of Lance Henriksen, it would look fucking garbage.
Yeah. All the deepfake stuff looks pretty bad, I think.
Yeah.
There's not many I've watched where I've gone, that enhances my life.
Yeah.
I mean, the Star Wars stuff, so much of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you watch Rogue One, it's that you still get to the point where you get the Peter Cushing bits, and it just catapults me out of the film.
And that's the problem, because Rogue One's probably my favourite Star Wars film for years. I thought it was great, apart from why.
Yeah. I quite like Rogue One, but my favourite Star Wars films of all the new Star Wars films is Solo.
No.
I fucking love Solo.
No.
I love it. It's brilliant. It's great. I fucking love that film. Because it's silly. Yeah. I'm quite happy. So, yeah, the actual film adaptation of Slimer, Proteus. So, directed by Bob Keane, who worked on things like Hellraiser, Nightbreed, Candyman, Life Force as a special effects guy. Yeah. Do you remember back in the days when I would go and pick up ex-rental VHS tapes and we would get Bleep and watch Bad? Do you remember Waxwork 2, Lost in Time?
Vaguely.
Yeah.
I was trying to explain recently to somebody about the Dollman films.
Yeah.
And they were like, they were like, are you sure you didn't actually hallucinate the whole thing? I was like, no. Hear me out.
Yeah.
What it was, this amazing bounty hunter from the future travelled through time and somehow ended up on Earth in the 90s.
Brick Bader.
Yeah.
13 inches of pure acid.
Who happened to be the size of a doll. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, the best.
Yeah.
The best. Tim Thomerson.
But I was trying to explain that these films exist. They were like, no, you nobody would do that. I was like, however.
Yeah.
Because on Prime, it was probably about 2-3 years ago, Harley Davidson, the Marlboro Man, was on Prime.
Oh yeah, we watched it.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it's
amazingly bad.
That's another ex-rental tape we picked up. And we watched about a dozen times.
It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's just such a weird concept, like a near future.
It just didn't make any sense.
What am I watching?
Was Don Johnson? He was the Marlboro Man, wasn't he? Yeah.
No, Don Johnson was he was the Marlboro Man. Yeah.
Mickey Rourke
was the Harley Davidson. Yeah. And they're both like, I don't know. Do they both go to the same bar in future Las Vegas, which is under threat from a corporation or something?
I can't remember
and Robert Ginty, who was TV's The Exterminator, well, not TV's, who was Exploitation Cinema's The Exterminator, is a helicopter pilot in it as well. Yeah,
it was just absolutely ridiculous.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. It's super terrible. But yeah, Waxwork 2 Lost in Time, we had a lot of laughs watching that. Yeah. He also did the FX on the Leslie Nielsen clunker 2001: A Space Travesty. Yeah. But he directed about 8 films, including To Catch a Yeti.
Have we ever watched that one?
No. So he made this film. It was co-scripted by Robert Firth, a screenwriter and actor, with a variety of credits, including voice acting for the Arkham Knight Batman game, and having a small role in the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. It's one of those things. James Gunn worked in so many low-budget movies. Yeah. He would have like low-budget mates who we would get to come in and play roles.
But you can tell, can't you, in Guardians of the Galaxy, there's always like goons in the background, aren't they, going, but he's not worked for ages.
Yeah.
But it's like,
and there'll be people
make him a brilliant
There'll be
character.
people that he's mates with from working on trauma films in the 80s and stuff like that. So I got it on DVD for £1.97.
Excellent.
You can't find it on streaming. You can't even download a torrent of it. Unless you can find a cheap DVD of it, it's practically impossible to get hold of.
And then maybe we should watch it.
Yeah, well, it's in the DVD player right now, just in case we made that decision.
I think we should probably watch it.
Pretty close to the book. Again, makes the wise decision to eject the rape, make Alex the main protagonist, and be Craig Fairbrass. It's cheap, it's clunky, but actually entertaining in the way that all those straight-to-video sci-fi horrors were back in the VHS. Because we used to go... You remember Kitchener's on Chance Ave? We'd go down Kitchener's and they'd be selling ex-rental tapes, so I would get something with Mark Hamill.
Usually with Mark Hamill.
It was like a really bad horror film, a really bad sci-fi film with Mark Hamill in, or something like that. But yeah, it's... Because
Bob was... Just on the subject of Mark Hamill, what was the sci-fi film he did after the Star Wars stuff?
You're thinking of Slipstream.
Slipstream.
Guarantee it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was Slipstream.
Where that's a really fucking interesting movie because he plays a bounty hunter.
Yes.
Who's after android stroke synthetic played by Bob Peck.
Don't know who Bob Peck is.
You'd know Bob Peck if you saw him. He was in loads of British TV in the 80s. He plays the gamekeeper stroke hunter guy in Jurassic Park. Died of cancer just after Jurassic Park, otherwise he would have been around in a lot more Hollywood films.
Oh,
but he was in loads of 80s. I think the original Edge of Darkness, he was the main character. He was the father of Joanne Whalley-Kilmer in Edge of Darkness. Brilliant, brilliant actor. So he plays the android thing, and Bill Paxton is the guy who's trying to get the android somewhere. So it's Mark Hamill, Bob Peck,
a bad guy,
and Bill Paxton, with Mark Hamill as the bad guy. It's a really interesting movie, but it's really fucking hard to get hold of.
I remember watching it. It's like I'm going, well, Luke's changed a bit, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But I can't...
It's not a good movie, but it's an interesting movie.
No, but it's one of those kind of like 80s almost grim kind of sci-fi things where there's never a nice ending.
Oh yeah, it's grippy, it's ropey.
Yeah, it was,
yeah. It's that period in the 80s where people still wanted to make sci-fi films like the 70s.
Yeah.
You know, just not have them upbeat, have them gritty, have them not necessarily have the ending that you want. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to James Gunn's version of Zardos when he does that.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, maybe we shouldn't watch Proteus, maybe we should watch Zardos. Yeah. And I'm going to do an episode on Zardos because I've got the John Bowman novelisation. It's a screenplay, which is substantially different in a lot of ways. It's more sci-fi. Yeah. It's a really interesting read, actually, the John Bowman Zardoz novel. And it's a one-shit book.
It is an astonishing film, isn't it? I don't think... imagine making that now.
That won't get made, was it?
No.
The only reason that film got made is because I think was that one of the films where Sean Connery said, yes, I will come back and do Never Say Never Again. I will come back and do Diamonds Are Forever if you will bankroll me to do Zardoz and The Offence.
I know The Offence, he said The Offence. I thought there was 2 Sidney Lumet films.
Yeah, maybe it was, yeah.
There was The Offence and something else.
Oh, so maybe Zardoz was when, like, nobody gave a flying fuck what Sean Connery was doing.
That's
but The Offence was definitely one of them, wasn't it?
Yeah,
The Offence got made because he did Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is the single greatest thing to ever happen in the history of movies. Because The Offence is completely fucked, and how that film ever got
amazing,
made with Sean Connery in the starring role is astonishing.
And Sean Connery in it's just so good.
It's absolutely incredible in it.
Yeah.
That's basically a three-hander, isn't it? It's Sean Connery, Ian Bannon, and who's the guy who plays the guy who's interrogating him? Trevor Howard. Trevor Howard. Just astonishing performances.
Yeah, it's just brilliant.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Mind-blowing film, The Offence.
I don't reckon Zardoz was one of them. Because if, Connery went, The Offence, blah, 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 Zardoz, you'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
But they're going, no, you're all right. We'll get James Boland. We'll get James Boland to play Bond. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll get anyone. It doesn't matter.
Well, anyway, that was Slimer.
It was Slimer, yeah. I think we probably digressed a bit, but I didn't like it. And I never want to read it ever again.
The only thing that remains then is for you to roll the dice one more time to select the beer that we're going to drink when we go and watch Proteus.
3.
Yes, Carlsberg Special Brew.
No, thanks.
It's in the fridge, we've got to drink it. Anyway, thank you, Loz. We might watch Proteus and come back and record an addendum.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we might not. I'll go for a wee first and we'll think about it.
I really need one as well. Then.
Yeah, also we need food. Mm-hmm. All right, catch you later.
See ya.
Massive thanks to Loz once again for returning to Derry and Tom's to talk about some pretty filthy horror and to drink some old school horrors too. And if we thought that was filthy, well, blimey. Sabbat next. We've had some messages on Podbean recently. First, from Warmaster Xavier on our Coming to the Terraphiles show, where he said, the reminiscence of being on the dole is such a blast. 100% remember being there doing that. If I wasn't so skint, I'd say there were great times. I think I tend to block out the bad bits. I only remember the good bits, but there were good bits. And also, our old mucker, Chris Neely, he said, woot woot, my favourite spooky season podcast. Kool-Aid level cool and nostalgic euphoria. I'm listening to your old catalogue. One per day. I'm drinking a mudslide milkshake. It's basically builder's tea with fake sugar and a dollop of chocolate ice cream, plus a jigger of cheap rum. Goat's Hillbilly Mudslide uses moonshine or grappa instead of Admiral Nelson. $16.44 for 1.75 millilitres. Jesus, Chris, that's an incredible price for a huge amount of cheap rum. Anyway, he also said, YMMV, chilling freezer in a metal mug until a skin of ice forms. Lol. Michael Moorcock magic onion layers. Well, Chris, that does sound like a rather remarkable drink, one that I may have to explore. And in answer to a question I posed on the House on the Borderland episode from Paul McRandall, he said, Hi Andy, great episode. I was the one to suggest Tactile and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I picked up the CD back in 1999 just while I was reading Raid on Daughters, and it was that coincidence which first brought me to the House on the Borderland. Sadly, Tactile's John Everall is gone as well. He was a fascinating guy and I'd had a number of good conversations with him online over the years. Well, thanks for that reminder, Paul, and I'm so sorry for forgetting. This is a great album, by the way, and it is very sad to hear that John is gone too. But such is the way of life, I guess. But thanks as always to our patrons for keeping this show on the road. First, those without tier. Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster and Sebastian Weetabix. And to our Chaos engineers, Ed Von Stout, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Ben Fletcher, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner-Aston, Jim Kirkland, and the latest edition of Jim's newsletter, Pursuit of the Pale Prince, is out now, and, as ever, it's a great source of Moorcock news. Chief of which is that Jim himself went to Paris and lunched with Mike and is working on The Hobbstown Horror, a role-playing game module for Dungeon Crawl Classics RPG that'll use aspects of the Moorcock multiverse with Mike's full authorization. Jim and his collaborators will be playtesting it this winter, and it'll be out in the new year. When that gets closer, we'll have Jim here in Derry and Tom's to talk about it, Moorcock, and anything else that crosses our minds. And onwards, thanks to Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Nick Hopkinson, Urfa Ziv, Paul McRandall, of course, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler, Simon Perrins, and Ben Hagar. And Ben dropped me a line, and it turns out he's behind a book review blog I came across a few years ago, and he's already bagged the Breakfast in the Ruins tag for his blog years before I started this podcast. He also said, I've been planning for ages to launch a new paper zine based around reading paperback fans from charity shops, which I'm sure would be right up your street, so I'll definitely drop you a line when it becomes a reality. I'm nearly there on the first issue, but time is just so short. Actually, I discovered your podcast late last year when I saw an update from Andrew Netty saying he'd done an episode of the Breakfast in the Ruins podcast, and I'd associated that name with myself for so long that for one strange moment I thought I'd slipped into an alternate reality in which I did a podcast or something, but was very happy to investigate further and discover that not only does it exist on its own terms, but it's a great listen which crosses over with my own interests pretty extensively. I really enjoyed the Pisces Rising episode. I've had a copy of that on the shelf for years, but I've never read it. I think you've saved me the bother. And looking forward to hearing your thoughts on House on the Borderland as I tidy up the flat next weekend. Sorry to waffle on, but nice to finally meet you, in text form at least, and wishing you and the podcast all the best going forward. Ben, if you get round to launching that zine, let me know. I'd love to talk to you about it and support it because you're absolutely spot on. It sounds right up my street. And of course, thanks to our crafty Jugadarios, Christian Hundal, Graham Holden, Liam Turner, Loz, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Sean Twist, Toby White, and Taylor Lavery. And eternal thanks to our patron demons, Alistair Davison, Andy Clark, Andy Darby, David Lee, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Imria, Janie Stim, Jason Vogel, Joe Monty, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Mark Hebden, Mary Slatauskas, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tony Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but of course never least, Robert McMillan. Enough of my yakking. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can find me on Mastodon and Blue Sky where I'm Stimbot5000. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. BITR Breakfast in the Ruins Radio is live on Radio Garden or via the web player at breakfastintheruinsradio.blogspot.com. We have our Patreon page too, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But for now, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.
Okay, we just watched Proteus.
Oh, yes.
It was crapadonga.
Yeah, we watched it so you didn't have to.
Yeah, I think I might have foolishly talked it up.
Yeah, I think talking it up is the phrase. Babadoola, I think, might be a phrase we may use.
I think what we experienced was the hardcore problem that... Well, actually, several hardcore problems. One is when you try and make a 90-minute film with the budget of one episode of Albion Market, you've got an instant problem.
Yeah, you spent it all on the sweets.
Especially when it's a sci-fi monster movie. Yeah. The second problem is when you take out all the problematic elements that we spoke about earlier, but replace them with fuck all, you end up with something that's boring as shit.
It was one of the most boring films I've ever seen in my life. It was there's zero jeopardy. Yeah, it was quite rubbish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Craig Fairbrass's biceps only go so far.
They were brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, fair play to Craig. He had a proto mullet, not a full mullet, and the biceps to show.
Yeah.
He was backed up by a few, I've no idea, jobbing actors. They were kind of mostly awful.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really, really bad.
Yeah, it's Babadook though, isn't it?
Yeah. Still, thanks for coming.
Yeah, at least I have to read a shit book and then watch the film version of it.
Yeah. But, we could just watch Leviathan instead.
We can't do that now. That'd be madness.
No, that is true.
Yeah, I think weirdly, the book, despite its gnarly unpleasantness, was better than the film.
Well, the book was not boring.
No, the film was utterly tedious.
Yeah, and the book benefits from theatre of the mind, where even when the description of one of the core characters is he looks like the scientist out of the Muppet Show.
Yeah, and disappointingly, the guy in the film didn't look.
He didn't
like that.
look anything like the scientist in the Muppet Show.
Or Beaker.
I think you made the point that whilst the ending of the book isn't that cerebral, it's more cerebral than giant monster exploding.
Yeah, it come down to the fact that you've got a monster.
Yeah.
How do you kill a monster? Generally, fire, explosions, or... Well, that's it, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
How many... Yeah.
I appreciate them making the effort to put in a big tentacle shark monster at the end.
Yeah.
Even if it's plainly obvious that the pyrotechnics and the big tentacle shark monster at the end probably consumed 90% of the budget. I would say 90% of the budget is the tentacle shark monster and the pyrotechnics. 5% of the budget is Craig Fairbrass's gym membership.
Yeah, and then you've got like shit plastic guns.
Yeah. I would say they probably had to pay Doug Bradley a few quid to turn up and be slapped up in old man makeup at the end. But yeah, it wasn't good.
It was balls, wasn't it? I think in balls out of 10, I would probably give it a 3 balls out of 10. It was.
Yeah, I would give it 9. No, maybe I've got this the wrong way around. Would it be 9 oversized spiky cocks out of 10, or would it be 1 oversized spiky cocks out of 10?
I don't know. Either way, I think we didn't like it.
No.
I think the mechanism of... Yeah, it was rubbish.
Yeah, I think that's the way we'll need to leave it.
Yeah.
It was rubbish.
The book was rubbish. The film was rubbish.
But the scales of rubbish, isn't there? There's levels of rubbish.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and the book was less rubbish than the film.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. You know what? The book was a passing diversion with problems.
Yeah.
And some interesting ideas. The film was creatively moribund.
At best. Directed as a shit EastEnders episode. With
had that been an EastEnders episode,
that would be amazing.
I would probably be more than happy with it.
Yeah, that would be great. Or even but yeah, it was BBC Two, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was disappointing.
Yeah, but I think probably suffice to say, it was shit. Let's never talk of it again.
Oh, please, God, no.
All right,
it's dead to me.
Yeah, let's drink more wine and probably go to bed.
Yeah, probably best.